Chapter 340. The golden light that emerged from the pitch-black round charcoal was even more dazzling than the usual golden light. It was especially eye-catching and attracted everyone's attention. It was as if a flower bud that had been brewing for a long time had blossomed in an instant. The pitch-black charcoal layer was actually peeling off at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the golden light became even more intense. Steam accompanied the golden light as it surged into the air. It was hazy, as if it was a treasure from a fairyland. A rich fragrance surged into the air, making it impossible for anyone to resist. After being roasted, the lion-head demonic potato had an indescribable aroma. There was a hint of scorching smell within the aroma, but it was especially rich. Beneath the peeling charcoal layer was the orange-red flesh of the demonic potato. The flesh of the demonic potato was like a work of art meticulously sculpted by the heavens. It was exquisite and translucent, just like the most precious amber. Dense steam permeated the air around the amber-like flesh, making it even more tempting and appetizing. "Isn't it beautiful?" Bufang said in satisfaction as he held the lion-head demonic potato in one hand. The sweet aroma of the demonic potato caused Bufang's expression to soften. Duan Yun blankly stared at the steaming demonic potato as his nose twitched. The fragrance seemed to possess some sort of magical power. He couldn't help but take in deep breaths in an attempt to inhale the fragrance that permeated the air. After hearing Bufang's question, Duan Yun blankly nodded his head. He never imagined that the lion-head demonic potato could actually become so beautiful. The lion-head demonic potato was a precious 8th-grade spirit herb. Most people would use it to refine elixirs after obtaining it. No one would choose to cook it. Only the freak in front of him would make such a choice. In any case, even though Duan Yun disapproved of the way Bufang used the lion-head demonic potato to cook, the aroma of the cooked lion-head demonic potato was truly enticing. "Give it a taste, it'll taste even better." A wisp of green smoke curled around Bufang's hand as the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. With a flash of the knife, the translucent half of the amber-like lion-head demonic potato was cut off. Bufang caught it with the kitchen knife and handed it to Duan Yun. "It could really be eaten?" Duan Yun swallowed a mouthful of saliva, glanced at Bufang and took a deep breath. It would be a waste not to eat it. Duan Yun covered his hand with true energy and grabbed the demonic potato meat. The steaming hot demonic potato meat was extremely hot. Although his palm was covered with true energy, it was still scalding and made him scream in pain. His whole body became spirited. He carefully grabbed the lion-head demonic potato with both hands and gently blew on it, causing the heat on the demonic potato to dissipate. Bufang ignored Duan Yun and turned his attention to the lion-head demonic potato in his hand. Roasting a sweet potato was actually a way of cooking during one's leisure time. One would dig a hole in the ground, place a few stones into the hole, then bury the sweet potato. Flammable materials such as hay would be placed in the hole and the heat would be used to roast the sweet potato. This was a method that Bufang remembered from his previous life. Of course, there were many other methods. For example, one could prepare a charcoal stove and roast the sweet potato in it. This way, the moisture on the surface of the sweet potato would disappear and after peeling off the dry skin, one would be able to see the sweet and tender sweet potato meat inside. The taste was extremely delicious. After peeling off the carbon layer, Bufang sucked in a deep breath, blew on it, and took a bite without the slightest scruple. The scalding hot demonic potato meat almost scalded his teeth. Only after taking a bite and exhaling in his mouth did he realize the unique fragrance. The sweetness enveloped his taste buds and tickled his nerves, causing his eyes to flicker in an instant. The texture of the demonic potato meat was extremely good. The essence energy within was basically preserved and the spirit energy was especially rich. The small lion-head demonic potato contained a spirit energy that was like a bomb that was about to explode. Most importantly, Bufang sensed something from the roasted demonic potato that he had never tasted before in his previous dishes. It was an indescribable and indescribable feeling. It was like an epiphany, a mysterious state. Bufang concluded that it was spirituality. Although the roasted demonic potato meat was simple, compared to Bufang's previous dishes, it had a spirituality. Although there wasn't a lot of it, and he wouldn't be able to sense it if he didn't pay close attention, his soul force had become more and more sensitive as his cultivation base increased. The appearance of spirituality in a dish made Bufang feel as though he had discovered something new. As he became an intermediate chef, Bufang's culinary skills seemed to have reached a bottleneck. Although he would improve every time, the improvement wasn't much and was even getting smaller and smaller. Bufang wanted to become the god of cooking who stood at the top of the food chain in this fantasy world. The smaller the improvement, the further he progressed, the further away he would be from his goal. Of course, in his heart, he knew that it was naturally easy to improve at the beginning. However, the higher his level, the higher his vision, and the higher his culinary skills, the more difficult it would be to improve. Perhaps every improvement required a deep foundation. As Bufang ate the roasted demonic potato, he fell into deep thought for a moment. Munch munch, munch munch. A rhythmic munching sound jolted Bufang out of his thoughts. A gaze that made Bufang feel a chill was staring at him, causing Bufang to raise his eyebrows in surprise. Following the gaze, he saw Duan Yun, who had stood up at some point and was staring at the demonic potato meat in his hand with glowing eyes. What was going on? Bufang was dumbfounded. Duan Yun's mouth kept munching and finally, with a gulp, he swallowed the demonic potato meat in his mouth. His whole body was gasping for air. Duan Yun felt as though he had been baptized. This was the first time he had tasted such a delicious dish. The feeling it gave him was as though he had just eaten an 8th-grade elixir. How inconceivable was this? After being roasted, not only did the essence within the demonic potato remain intact, it was even more well-preserved. The moment it entered his mouth, the spirit energy and essence energy within it seemed as though they were about to explode. It made him feel as though he was surfing in the ocean. That comfortable feeling made Duan Yun addicted. How could it be so delicious? Duan Yun howled in his heart. Delicious, this was the true delicacy. It turned out that roasted sweet potatoes with alchemic fire tasted so good. Duan Yun was extremely excited. He was even considering whether he should change his occupation and use alchemic fire to roast sweet potatoes. However, this was just a thought. If his sect found out that he used alchemic fire to roast sweet potatoes, it wouldn't just be a matter of being drowned in a pig's cage. Facing Duan Yun's greedy gaze, Bufang expressionlessly and leisurely stuffed the remaining half of the lion head demonic potato into his mouth. Munch munch. A rhythmic chewing sound rang out, causing Duan Yun to feel as though his body was being hollowed out. After forcefully swallowing the demonic potato, Bufang let out a satisfied burp. The burp was accompanied by a rich spirit energy and essence energy that filled the air. Suddenly, Bufang's eyes widened and he patted his chest. With a wave of his hand, he took out a wine pot from the system's dimensional storage. After gulping down a mouthful of wine, Bufang let out a satisfied breath. The taste of the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew paired with the roasted sweet potato was indeed not bad. A rich wine fragrance filled the air. Duan Yun's eyeballs nearly popped out of their sockets. This wine fragrance was simply 2F** king fragrant. Bufang gulped down another mouthful and smacked his lips in satisfaction. Then, he saw the dumbfounded Duan Yun not far from him. Want a cup? Bufang raised the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew in his hand. Really? Can I? Duan Yun's eyes lit up and he asked in embarrassment. However, his movements were not slow. In just a few moments, he had arrived in front of Bufang. Of course not. With a wave of his hand, Bufang stored the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew into the system's dimensional storage. This wine is very expensive. Duan Yun felt extremely awkward. What happened to the trust between people? What happened to sharing it? Weren't we friends? After tasting the lion head demonic potato roasted with alchemic fire, Bufang was even more interested in the effects of these peculiar flames. His heart was burning with passion. With these flames, his culinary skills would definitely improve once again. Cooking with alchemic fire could allow the roasted demonic potato to possess a trace of spirituality. What if he used the heaven and earth obsidian flame or the 10,000 bestial flames to cook it? Bufang did not dare to imagine it. He came to the 100,000 mountains in search of the 10,000 bestial flames to activate the Black Turtle constellation Wa. Now, he could not wait to obtain the 10,000 bestial flames. This was because it would determine whether his culinary skills could achieve greater breakthroughs. Duan Yun looked at Bufang's departing figure and licked his lip. His eyes lit up as he eagerly rushed over to Bufang. Chapter 341. The 100,000 Mountains, the Clear Sky Pagoda. A towering, unadorned iron pagoda stood amidst the towering forest. Around the iron tower, there were houses of various sizes. These houses were endless, forming a small city around the iron tower. Within this small city, disciples of the Clear Sky Pagoda dressed in white robes embroidered with the image of a black iron pagoda could be seen. The city gate opened with a rumble, and a group of people supported each other as they returned to the small city. A screech resounded in the sky. The intense sun bird spread its wings and landed in the city, bringing with it a monstrous heat wave. A chubby old man descended from the back of the intense sun bird. This person was the supreme being expert of the Clear Sky Pagoda, Yi Yunqing. Is someone injured again? Yi Yunqing frowned as he looked at the heavily injured elder. The 100,000 mountains had not been peaceful recently, because it was time for the 10,000 bestial flames to erupt again. In the past, the 10,000 bestial flames had been suppressed every time it erupted. However, as the number of times it was suppressed increased, the 10,000 bestial flames became more and more terrifying. This time, the 10,000 bestial flames would be completely released. It was obvious that many experts had come to the 100,000 mountains for the 10,000 bestial flames. After all, it was a heaven and earth obsidian flame. How could it not be coveted? Grandpa! Yi Xiling carried a longbow on her back and dragged Yi Peng by the ear as she walked out of the crowd. Yi Yunqing heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Yi Xiling and Yi Peng were safe and sound. You two troublemakers! Don't you know that the 100,000 mountains have not been peaceful recently? Stay in the Clear Sky Pagoda and don't go out. Yi Yunqing lectured them with a stern face. Yi Xiling pouted, while Yi Peng drooped his head and remained silent. Grandpa, I met a senior when I went out this time. That senior's culinary skills are really amazing. Yi Peng waited until Yi Yunqing's anger had subsided before he moved closer to him. A chef? There are many chefs out there. What's there to be surprised about? Yi Yunqing was someone who had witnessed Owner Bu's culinary skills. The dragon liver popsicle was still on his mind. Many drakes in the 100,000 mountains were killed by him, which infuriated the supreme beast. It chased him and beat him until he crossed half of the 100,000 mountains. Therefore, when he heard Yi Peng call him a chef, he did not think much of it. No matter how good his cooking was, could it be better than Owner Bu's? Yi Peng was a little unconvinced. He recounted his earlier encounter, focusing on the snakeball dragon blood congee cooked by Bufang. Now that he thought of the snakeball dragon blood congee, he couldn't help but drool. Yi Xiling was incomparably disgusted. Look at you! Wait! Brat, what did you just say? Yi Yunqing didn't take it seriously at first, but as he listened, he realized that something was wrong. You're saying that there's a lump of metal following that chef? Yeah. That lump of metal was chubby and very unconventional. I even took a few extra glances at it, Yi Peng said seriously. The cold and thin chef was a chubby puppet, but his culinary skills were superb. Could it be Yi Xiling, who was beside him, was also dumbfounded. She recalled that the figure she caught a glimpse of seemed somewhat familiar. Could it really be what the F***ck? The muscles on Yi Yunqing's chubby face trembled. Could it be that the chef this brat met was Owner Bu? Owner Bu, this bastard, also came to the 100,000 Mountains? Why did Owner Bu come to the 100,000 Mountains? Could it be for the 10,000 bestial flames as well? Why would a chef like him need the 10,000 bestial flames? The expression on the chubby elder's face became more and more interesting. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. Could it be that Owner Bu planned to use the 10,000 bestial flames to cook dishes? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Based on Owner Bu's character. He even made a dragon liver popsicle. Using the heaven and earth obsidian flames to cook didn't seem like a big deal. The chubby elder thought about it, but the expression on his face became increasingly strange. Duan Yun followed behind Bu Fang. He looked at Bu Fang's emaciated figure and then at the lump of metal following beside Bu Fang. The suspicion on his face became more and more intense. Bu Fang's cultivation level wasn't high, but his methods were very powerful. Even now, he still shuddered at the thought of that black wok. That black wok was definitely something extraordinary. It might even be a semi-divine tool. However, after thinking about it, he couldn't be sure. What kind of master refiner would be so bored as to refine a wok as a semi-divine tool? Refining a semi-divine tool required precious materials. Usually, the materials used to refine swords, spears, halberds, and the like were more practical. Refining a wok. Wouldn't it be crazy? From all these signs, he felt that Bu Fang was definitely not an ordinary person. Although Duan Yun wasn't very familiar with the southern region, it was still a training ground. He, Duan Yun, came from outside the southern region. With his cultivation level and the alchemic fire in his body, crossing the 100,000 mountains wouldn't be a difficult task. Could it be that Bu Fang also came from outside the southern region? Was his goal also the 10,000 bestial flames in the 100,000 mountains? The more Duan Yun thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. The 10,000 bestial flames was a heaven and earth obsidian flame. It was something that could only be chanced upon and not sought. This time, he was well informed and knew that this training ground had this heaven and earth obsidian flame. That was why he came here. He wasn't the only one. Many geniuses also came to this training ground for this heaven and earth obsidian flame. The southern region was just a small place at the edge of the hidden dragon continent. Normally, it was a training ground for the big sections. Since it was a training ground, it was obvious from the name. The southern region was a training ground used by the big sects to train their juniors. Duan Yun didn't belong to this big sect. He snuck in because the 100,000 mountains was huge. It wasn't difficult for him to sneak in. Do you know where the 10,000 bestial flames is? The two of them walked in the gloomy forest. They were surrounded by ancient green pines. Fallen leaves covered the ground like a layer of cotton-padded jacket. Some of the leaves were even rotting and emitted a sour smell. Occasionally, small figures would scuttle past the ancient trees. They were the low-grade spirit beasts that lived on the ancient trees. I don't know. I'm here for the 10,000 bestial flames. I was looking for trouble with the people from the Clear Sky Pagoda to find out the whereabouts of the 10,000 bestial flames. But before I could get any information, you ruined my plans. Duan Yun said with a pained expression. He really felt that he was undeserved. He was still in a daze after being hit by Bu Fang's wok for nothing. But don't worry. Once a heaven and earth obsidian flame like the 10,000 bestial flames is born, it will definitely cause a huge commotion. When the time comes, we can just follow the commotion and find it. That way, we won't have to meet the disciples of the big sections, said Duan Yun as he flicked his gray hair. If it wasn't for the several large lumps on his forehead, this flick of his hair would have looked quite flashy. The heaven and earth obsidian flame was about to be born. Naturally, there would be many people competing for it. The competition would be intense. Bufang took a step forward. Suddenly, his nose twitched. He smelled a fragrance mixed with the smell of decay. There's something good. Bufang's eyes lit up. He followed the direction of the fragrance. Duan Yun was taken aback. What was going on? He mimicked Bufang and sniffed, but he didn't smell any fragrance. Following behind Bufang, Duan Yun made several turns. The forest was filled with towering trees. Even the road seemed a little crowded. But after a few turns, a glimmer of hope suddenly appeared in front of them. Suddenly, the view before him widened. Bufang widened his eyes as he stared at a clearing in the distance. It was a vast clearing. Not a single blade of grass grew around it. Even trees couldn't enter the area. It was as if they were isolated. In the center of the clearing there was a small purple tree. Purple flower blossoms bloomed on the tree, and a few purple fruits hung from it. The fragrance that Bufang smelled came from this small tree. This is the purple cloud fruit tree. There's actually a purple cloud fruit tree here? Duan Yun widened his eyes in excitement. The purple cloud fruit tree was an 8th grade spirit herb. The purple cloud fruit it bore was also a precious 7th grade spirit herb. It wasn't easy to find such an item. Moreover, the most important thing about the purple cloud fruit tree was not the fruit or the flowers, but the juice within. When the trunk of the purple cloud fruit tree was cut open, a light purple liquid would gush out. That was the juice of the purple cloud fruit. It tasted delicious and was a precious spirit liquid used for recovery. Duan Yun was very excited. He took a step forward, intending to rush toward the purple cloud fruit tree. However, Bufang was very calm. He glanced at Duan Yun, then looked at the white skeletons scattered around the clearing. Suddenly, he blinked. Chapter 342. Her sparkling, jade-like feet stepped on the fallen leaves that covered the forest path. The fallen leaves on the ground slightly sunk into the ground, but not a speck of dust landed on her feet. The pitch-black leaves accentuated the whiteness of her tiny feet. Her well-proportioned calves and ample curves made one's imagination run wild. Sovereign, are we going directly to the city where the clear sky pagoda is located? In the quiet forest, a gentle and charming female voice rang out, reverberating unscrupulously in the forest. Why would we go to the clear sky pagoda? We should go directly to the location of the 10,000 bestial flames and wait for the birth of the 10,000 bestial flames. After all, this is a heaven and earth obsidian flame. It will surely attract many people. Let's go ahead of time and let the departed soul orb absorb a few more soul essences. The Shura sect sovereign's voice was hoarse and full of vicissitudes of life. The high priestess' eyes, hidden under her mask, lit up with excitement. Then, the two of them increased their speed. Although the forest was overgrown with trees, every step they took brought them a great distance. In this forest full of strong trees, they did not feel like they were lost at all. Their destination was very clear. Outside the 100,000 mountains, an old man was riding on a withered white bird. He was flying in the sky. He wore a white robe, had white hair, a white beard, and eyebrows. This old man seemed to be white from head to toe. He gave off a feeling of immortality. He sat cross-legged on the back of the white bird. As they approached the 100,000 mountains, the old man slowly floated down from the back of the bird, as light as a swallow. He raised his hand and patted the head of the bird. With a melodious chirp, the bird circled in the sky, then spread its wings and flew toward the scorching sun. The old man in the white robe clasped his hands behind his back and slowly descended from the sky. He squinted his eyes as he gazed at the boundless mountains and rivers. The 100,000 mountains is still as beautiful as ever. It's a pity that it hides endless dangers, the old man said calmly. In his eyes, it was as if he could see the illusory shadow of a ferocious dragon surging out from the 100,000 mountains. The shadow of the dragon struggled and roared soundlessly. At its waist, a dazzling ball of light intercepted its body. The old man took in a deep breath. The Tianji Sek's qi gazing technique allowed him to clearly see the qi of a mountain. The dragon qi of the 100,000 mountains was surging violently. However, there was a dazzling radiance around the abdomen, causing the dragon vein qi to be sucked into that position. That should be the birthplace of the 10,000 bestial flames. Only a heaven and earth obsidian flame could plunder the dragon vein energy of an entire mountain and river. Of course, it was impossible to form a heaven and earth obsidian flame just because the dragon vein qi had been plundered. There were many other factors involved. However, the elder did not need to know that much. He only needed to know that the place where the dragon vein was blocked was the birthplace of the heaven and earth obsidian flame. The wind blew, causing his white hair to become even more ethereal. Suddenly, outside the 100,000 mountains, a sharp sword qi whistled through the air. The elder turned his head and looked over with a smile. He saw a sword light speeding toward him. The leader of the sword light was a middle-aged man dressed in an embroidered robe. The man had a dignified face, sword-like eyebrows, and starry eyes. His temperament was like an unsheathed longsword, overbearing and threatening. He flew on his sword at lightning speed. The sword light dispersed and the speed of the sword gradually slowed down. Soon, the figure appeared beside the elder. White Cloud Villa's Villa Master, Wu Mu, pays his respects to the Celestial Arcanum Sect's Supreme Elder. The middle-aged man politely and respectfully bowed to the elder. The elder smiled warmly and waved his hand. Wu Mu was the Villa Master of the White Cloud Villa, a 9th-grade Supreme Being swordsman. The flying sword beneath his feet was the White Cloud Villa's semi-divine tool, the Cloud Rising Sword. Villa Master Wu's sword intent is getting stronger and stronger. It seems like your cultivation has made great progress. Congratulations! The Supreme Elder laughed. A trace of a smile appeared on Wu Mu's solemn face. After exchanging greetings, the two of them sped toward the mountain and river. Their goal was the 10,000 bestial flames, or rather, to prevent the Shura sect overlord from obtaining the 10,000 bestial flames. After the two of them left, a thunderous roar resounded in the sky once again. Then, a gigantic one-legged toad, which seemed to be able to blot out the sun, leaped toward them from afar. Every time it leaped, the ground would tremble violently. It was actually a supreme beast. On the head of the supreme beast, there were several tiny figures. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the auras of these figures were extremely powerful. This was especially true for the leader. Although his body was tiny, his aura wasn't any weaker than that of the gigantic one-legged toad supreme beast. The experts from the godly temple of the Wildlands had finally arrived. Bufang looked at Duan Yun with a faint smile. He was too lazy to warn Duan Yun, so he just watched calmly. The area around the violet cloud fruit tree was empty, but there were many skeletons scattered around. These white skeletons were extremely eerie, as if foreshadowing the dangers of this place. Duan Yun was a bold and talented person. He came from outside the southern region, so he naturally wasn't afraid of this training ground. He possessed alchemic fire and his cultivation wasn't too bad either, so he wasn't worried about the dangers. However, just as he stepped into the empty area, a sense of danger rose in his heart. The ground beneath his feet suddenly cracked open, and a ferocious mouth appeared in front of him, causing all the hairs on his body to stand on end. There was actually an 8th-grade beast here? Alchemic fire surged, and with a loud bang, Duan Yun's figure suddenly shot up. This was an 8th-grade earth dragon. Its entire body was covered with sinister spikes, and its eyes were blood-red. Its ferocious mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth. This earth dragon was like a gigantic lizard. Its movements were extremely swift, and with a loud rumble, it charged toward Duan Yun. Its tail, which was like a steel whip, swept across, intending to break Duan Yun's waist. Duan Yun was instantly enraged. An 8th grade beast actually dared to attack him. With his alchemic fire in hand, Duan Yun was fearless. His figure swooped down and instantly engaged in a fierce battle with the 8th grade Earth Dragon. In an instant, a violent gust of wind and surging waves of fire erupted in the empty area. The dried bones scattered all over the ground were overturned and blown away. The violet cloud fruit tree was still blooming with radiance and fragrance, swaying gently in the wind. An 8th grade Earth Dragon. Bufang suddenly realized that this beast was actually using the violet cloud fruit tree as a trap to capture prey. Of course, it could also be said that this Earth Dragon was the guardian spirit beast of the violet cloud fruit tree. After all, the name of the Earth Dragon had the word dragon in it, so it was related to dragons. Duan Yun and the Earth Dragon fought for a long time, but there was still no clear victor. This made Duan Yun's forehead sweat uncontrollably. The more he fought, the angrier he became. This Earth Dragon had coarse skin and thick flesh, and could even breathe fire. Although it was afraid of his alchemic fire, its resistance was much stronger. After all, Duan Yun was only an 8th grade war god. Without his alchemic fire, he was naturally no match for an Earth Dragon. This Earth Dragon's cultivation was very strong, and it was probably already preparing to evolve into a supreme beast. Roar! With a swing of its tail, it flung Duan Yun out of the open area. The Earth Dragon suddenly crawled forward, opened its bloody mouth, and roared at Bufang and Duan Yun. A foul stench assaulted their noses. Bufang indifferently glanced at the Earth Dragon, then took a step forward and slowly stepped into the area. Green smoke curled up from his arm, and soon, a simple, pitch-black kitchen knife appeared in his hand. This was the Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, which was the natural nemesis of dragon-type spirit beasts. With Bufang's current cultivation, if he used this Golden Dragon Bone Kitchen Knife, even a Supreme Being-level dragon-type spirit beast would be suppressed. The Earth Dragon also felt a sense of danger from the depths of its bloodline, and its malevolent eyes abruptly shrank. Duan Yun stood in the distance and watched in astonishment as Bufang prepared to make a move. The alchemic fire in his hand also dissipated, and he was quite intrigued. This Earth Dragon was very strong, and he wanted to see how Bufang would deal with it. Smash it with a wok? This Earth Dragon's skin was coarse and its flesh thick. Did he think it was Duan Yun? However, the next scene almost made his eyeballs pop out of their socket. That was because the Earth Dragon that had fought a bloody battle with him for a long time, the Earth Dragon that had almost broken his waist, was killed by Bufang with just 2 slashes. A resplendent golden radiance emerged, almost illuminating the gloomy forest. Bufang carried a giant golden kitchen knife on his shoulder, and his expression was incomparably calm. Beneath his feet was the Earth Dragon that had been showing off before him. At this moment, this Earth Dragon had its head and tail chopped off. Dragon blood flowed all over the ground, causing the forest to stink even more. Duan Yun was dumbfounded, and he was completely dumbfounded. He didn't understand, and he was puzzled. 2 slashes? This Earth Dragon must be fake, right? Bufang was merely a 7th grade battle saint, slightly weaker than him. This Earth Dragon was full of vigor when facing him, but why was it so weak when facing Bufang? Was it because he was too weak, or was it because Bufang was too strong? Bufang put away the ostentatious golden kitchen knife on his shoulder. He glanced at Duan Yun, patted the Earth Dragon's giant body, and said calmly, "Carry this Earth Dragon. Tonight we'll be eating dragon meat." Chapter 343. With just 2 slashes, he killed the Earth Dragon that he had been fighting with for half a day. Why was this Bufang so powerful? It was simply outrageous. Duan Yun was extremely shocked. There would be no harm if there was no comparison. When he compared his sorry state against the Earth Dragon to Bufang's relaxed and carefree manner, an indescribable sense of disparity emerged in his heart. Bufang did not care about what Duan Yun was thinking. He walked around the Earth Dragon's corpse and slowly walked toward the violet cloud fruit tree. A faint light lingered on the violet cloud fruit tree, emitting a fluorescent glow. A sweet fragrance filled the air, carrying a trace of the unique aroma of spirit fruits. Bufang could not help but want to pluck one to taste its flavor. He plucked a violet cloud fruit. This was a 7th grade violet cloud fruit, and it was brewing with a surging spirit energy. Bufang easily peeled off the skin of the violet cloud fruit. The skin of the violet cloud fruit was harder than the tender flesh inside. It tasted dry and a little bitter. It was not delicious. The most delicious part was the flesh inside. The flesh was the essence of the fruit. The flesh of the violet cloud fruit was not purple. Instead, it was transparent like an ice cube, just like a lychee. After taking a bite of the violet cloud fruit, the juice flowed into Bufang's mouth. A sweet fragrance lingered in Bufang's mouth. It was not bad at all. After quickly finishing the violet cloud fruit, Bufang casually took out a blue and white porcelain bowl. The next step was the correct way to open the violet cloud fruit tree. Green smoke lingered and the dragon bone kitchen knife once again appeared in his hand. Touching the smooth trunk of the violet cloud fruit tree, Bufang pondered over a spot. Then, he swiped the kitchen knife across and easily cut open the shiny bark. When he cut open the bark, a clear, spring-like juice seeped out from the cut. Compared to clear spring water, this juice was much thicker. Bufang placed the blue and white porcelain bowl under the cut and the juice continuously flowed into the bowl. After collecting a large bowl of clear juice, Bufang used his thumb to lightly press on the cut. The incision closed up and soon no more juice flowed out. Duan Yun also walked over. He looked at the bowl of purple cloud liquid with excitement. The healing effect of the purple cloud liquid was very good. Even without the healing effect, the purple cloud liquid was also very delicious. It was an excellent drink. Bufang ignored Duan Yun's envious gaze. Bufang picked up the porcelain bowl and took a sip. Rumble. Gulping down a mouthful of the purple cloud liquid, Bufang's eyes lit up the moment the liquid entered his mouth. This purple cloud liquid was very cold, as if it had been frozen. It was very refreshing when it entered the mouth. It was incomparably sweet and fragrant. It was a little like the sugarcane juice that Bufang drank in his previous life, but not as sweet. A lingering fragrance lingered in Bufang's mouth, causing Bufang to squint his eyes. The spirit energy within the purple cloud liquid was no less than that of the purple cloud fruit. After taking a sip, Bufang couldn't help but open his mouth and spit out dense spirit energy. A mouthful of purple cloud liquid washed away all the fatigue on his body. Not bad. Bufang was very satisfied. He picked up the porcelain bowl and continued to gulp down the liquid. After a while, the bowl of juice was completely emptied by Bufang. This purple cloud liquid was very thirst-quenching and had an excellent taste. It was indeed a good drink. After digging out the entire purple cloud fruit tree, Bufang stored the spirit herb into the system's dimensional storage. He planned to plant the tree when he returned to the store and use it as a landscaping. While curled up on a chair and basking in the sun, he could get a bowl of purple cloud liquid and slowly drink it. Just thinking about it made him feel very satisfied. Duan Yun also wanted to drink a mouthful of purple cloud liquid. However, Bufang ignored him and directly stored the purple cloud fruit tree. This made him feel a little annoyed. Carry this earth dragon. This is our rations for tonight, Bufang earnestly instructed. Then, he clasped his hands behind his back and walked in front. Duan Yun's face darkened. The earth dragon's body was huge. With his cultivation level at the peak of 8th grade war god, it wasn't difficult for Duan Yun to carry the earth dragon's corpse. 2 people, a puppet and an earth dragon's corpse walked in the forest for a long time. The sky gradually darkened and the scorching sun hanging in the sky slowly set toward the west. The bright red glow lasted for a while before completely disappearing. The heaven and earth once again fell into silence. However, the 2 bright moons in the night sky were resonating with each other. A bonfire rose up. A big black wok was placed on top of the bonfire. The clear water inside was bubbling. Duan Yun sat at the side, occasionally adding some firewood to the bonfire. At this moment, his mind was still unable to calm down. This time, it wasn't because of Bu Fang's terrifying battle prowess. It was because Bu Fang had openly cut an incomparably huge earth dragon into pieces of meat in front of him. In the end, the entire earth dragon was only left with a white skeleton. This dissection technique, that knife skill. Duan Yun's scalp tingled when he recalled it. Bu Fang didn't put away the earth dragon's skin. This earth dragon lived underground all year round, so its skin was coarse and thick. The skin wasn't very useful, so after Bu Fang skinned it, he abandoned it. For this meal, Bu Fang prepared to cook red braised earth dragon meat. Duan Yun was a little absent-minded. As he smelled the rich fragrance in the air, as well as Bu Fang's skillful cooking skills, he couldn't believe that he was in the training ground. This was the training ground, so it wasn't dangerous for the genius disciples of the big sections. However, Duan Yun's cultivation wasn't high, so this training ground was still dangerous for him. However, it was the first time Duan Yun had met someone who could treat this training ground as his own kitchen in such a relaxed manner like Bu Fang. The earth dragon meat had a darker color, so Bu Fang didn't add any other seasonings when he cooked it. The color was already very attractive, sparkling and translucent. The earth dragon meat was very tender after its skin was peeled off. When the translucent meat was placed into a bowl, it would tremble like jelly. Under the reflection of the fire, the meat was glossy and sparkling. Anyone who looked at it would feel hungry. Bu Fang looked at the drooling Duan Yun and casually tossed him a bowl and chopstick. After Duan Yun caught it, he looked at Bu Fang with a strange expression. He carried pots, bowls, ladles, and kitchen knives with him. This Bu Fang. Did he really treat this training ground as his own kitchen? However, he didn't think too much about it. He copied Bu Fang's actions and picked up a piece of translucent, steaming earth dragon meat and placed it in his mouth. It was fresh and tender like jelly. It was bouncy and bounced against the walls of his mouth, causing his face to be filled with enjoyment. The fragrance of the meat spread in his mouth and flowed into his nostrils. Every strand of fragrance seemed to transform into a thick cotton coat that wrapped around his body, making him feel extremely comfortable. How could this dish be so delicious? It turned out that the earth dragon meat was so delicious, Duan Yun exclaimed in admiration as he ate. His mouth was covered in oil, and his eyes were shining brightly. The more he ate, the more shocked Duan Yun became. The taste of the roasted demonic potato had already exceeded his expectations. However, the skill required to roast the demonic potato was not very high. Even if it was, Duan Yun wouldn't have been able to tell. He could only think that Bu Fang was lucky and that the demonic potato had an excellent texture. However, this time, the red braised earth dragon meat was truly cooked. His movements were as smooth as flowing water, as though he was drawing a painting. It was 2F** king natural. This Bu Fang was actually a chef. As a disciple of the alchemy faction, he couldn't even defeat a chef. It was simply too sad. However, even though he was sad, Duan Yun couldn't control himself in front of this delicacy. If there was a first time, there would naturally be a second time. He was once again tricked by Bu Fang into spitting out his alchemic fire. This time, Bu Fang actually used his alchemic fire to roast the meat. At that time, Duan Yun refused because he remembered the dignity of an alchemist. However, when he recalled the deliciousness of the red braised earth dragon meat, he felt that the dignity of an alchemist could be discussed later. In any case, he was already forced to roast the sweet potatoes, so what was the point of roasting the meat? Just as the earth dragon meat was roasted by Bu Fang until it was bright red and translucent, oil dripped down from the roasted meat. A rich meaty fragrance permeated the air, as though tiny snakes were drilling into Duan Yun's body. Duan Yun, who was spitting out the fire, began to salivate. The smell of roasted meat cooked by alchemic fire was simply too fragrant. The fragrance was too enticing. Duan Yun almost lost control of the fire as he inhaled the fragrance, causing his body to tremble. Bufang furrowed his brows and said, "Calm down and control the fire. Don't be anxious and believe in yourself. You are a professional." Duan Yun was on the verge of vomiting blood. He roared in his heart, "I am not a professional fire boy. I am a noble alchemist." Ah! Just as the roasted earth dragon meat was about to be completed, a violent explosion suddenly erupted from the 100,000 mountains. Flames soared into the sky from the location of the explosion. The flames blotted out the sky and illuminated the dark night like it was daytime. Duan Yun was startled. Could the 10,000 bestial flames have been born? Bufang shot a glance in the direction of the flames. Then, he calmly turned his head and looked at the roasted earth dragon meat. He furrowed his brows. Focus and stabilize the fire. Even if the 10,000 bestial flames have been born, we still have to finish roasting the meat. Chapter 344. The Clear Sky Pagoda. A violent explosion caused the entire Clear Sky Pagoda to tremble. The small city below the Clear Sky Pagoda instantly became bustling with activity. Numerous disciples ran out from their respective training grounds. They were still in a state of shock. They were all frightened by the explosion. How many years had it been since such a terrifying explosion occurred in the Clear Sky Pagoda? What exactly happened? There were many things that ordinary disciples were unaware of because they could not come into contact with people of this level. The 10,000 bestial flames was a heaven and earth obsidian flame that the Clear Sky Pagoda had guarded for a long time. This type of heaven and earth obsidian flame was extremely formidable. If not for the suppression of the 100,000 mountains dragon veins and the Clear Sky Pagoda's array, the entire region would have long been incinerated by the heaven and earth obsidian flame. Only the higher-ups of the Clear Sky Pagoda could come into contact with something of this level. Therefore, when the explosion occurred, many people were still in a state of shock. However, the supreme beings of the Clear Sky Pagoda wore grave expressions as they looked in a certain direction. There, the flames surged to the heavens, illuminating the dark night. It was as bright as day. This scene was extremely terrifying. Yi Yunqing furrowed his brows and stared in that direction for a long time. Then, he let out a long sigh. He arranged for Yi Xiling and Yi Pang to return and instructed them not to run around. Then, he sat on the back of the ardent sun bird and sped toward the direction of the explosion. Several figures shot out from the Clear Sky Pagoda. They were all the top experts of the Clear Sky Pagoda. Inside the densely packed 100,000 mountains, a group of people slowly raised their head. The aura emanating from their bodies was extremely powerful. They were dressed in the same long robes, but it was obvious that they were not disciples of the Clear Sky Pagoda. "Senior brother, is the 10,000 bestial flames about to erupt?" One of them asked with a grave expression. "I'm afraid that even the sect elders are unaware of the existence of a heaven and earth obsidian flame in the training ground. But that's fine. This is also an opportunity for us. If we can obtain this heaven and earth obsidian flame, this training will be perfect. Bei Gongming will have a higher status in the sect." The leader was a handsome man. His eyes were filled with excitement as he looked in the direction of the fire. The southern region was the training ground of their sect. It was just a training ground for some disciples, and it was not very valued by the sect. However, who would have thought that a heaven and earth obsidian flame would appear in such a neglected area? That was a true treasure. As long as he could obtain it, the benefits to his cultivation would be indescribable. At that time, it wouldn't be impossible for him to become an influential figure in the sect. Go. We must get the 10,000 bestial flames. Kill anyone who dares to stop us. Greed surged in Bei Gongming's eyes. Then, killing intent gushed out from his body as he led the group of people toward the location where the 10,000 bestial flames were erupting. This concerned his future status and cultivation. How could he, Bei Gongming, not take it seriously? Very good. Slowly weaken the power of the alchemic fire. Just like that, Duan Yun's face darkened. His precious alchemic fire was actually used by Bu Fong to roast meat. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, he had to admit that the aroma that permeated the air was becoming more and more intense. It made him feel hungry, and his stomach rumbled from time to time. The explosions continued. Flames illuminated the sky and blotted out the sun. Both Duan Yun and Bu Fong knew that this was the sign that the 10,000 bestial flames was about to erupt. Duan Yun was very anxious. He naturally wanted to obtain something like the heaven and earth obsidian flames. However, Bu Fong remained calm and collected. His gaze landed on the roasted meat, neither hurried nor slow. There was no sense of urgency at all. It was as if the roasted meat was more important than the 10,000 bestial flames in Bu Fong's eyes. All right, the roast meat is done. The earth dragon meat roasted with the alchemic fire should taste pretty good, Bu Fong said as he narrowed his eyes after Duan Yun withdrew the alchemic fire. As the earth dragon meat was roasted by the alchemic fire, it became red and translucent. It resembled an exquisite ruby, glistening with oil. Steaming hot air filled the air above the earth dragon meat, accompanied by a rich fragrance, made the earth dragon meat extremely beautiful and greatly increased one's appetite. Bu Fong stood up and stretched his muscles. The grade of the earth dragon meat was quite high. Using true energy to restrain the spirit energy within the meat caused the aroma to be mellow and the oil to be rich. He tossed the roast meat to Duan Yun using a wooden stick. Bu Fong naturally wouldn't mistreat this kid for spitting out alchemic fire for half a day. Duan Yun excitedly caught the roast meat. As a result, the aroma of the roast meat completely enveloped his nostrils. He was completely intoxicated by it. He didn't even care about the blazing flames anymore. It smells so good. Duan Yun swallowed a mouthful of saliva and exclaimed subconsciously. Bu Fong held a skewer of roast meat in his hand as he glanced at the intoxicated Duan Yun. He stood up and gazed in the direction of the blazing flames. Without a second thought, he packed up his things, grabbed a skewer of roast meat, and headed in that direction. Duan Yun was licking the oil on the roast meat when he suddenly noticed that Bu Fong was about to leave. He immediately stood up in a flurry, took a bite of the roast meat, and followed after him. The taste of the roast meat was truly delicious. It wasn't too hard after being roasted by the alchemic fire. It was just tender and soft. It had a fragrant and chewy texture, filling his mouth with the aroma of roast meat. Boom! A loud bang resounded as a terrifying gale whistled past. Many trees in the mountain range were blown away by this gale. A gigantic foot descended from the sky and stomped on the mountain range, causing many trees to explode. A hurricane whistled past, blowing Duan Yun and Bu Fong's clothes and hair. The two of them protected the roast meat and frowned as they looked at the gigantic one-legged creature. Rumble! The sole leg lifted up once again, and with a sudden leap, it shot into the distance. Its speed was so fast that it only left behind a gigantic footprint on the ground. It was a gigantic one-legged toad that emitted a terrifying aura. "That's a supreme beast!" Duan Yun exclaimed in admiration. He came from outside the southern region, so he naturally wasn't too curious about supreme beasts. However, it was incredible for a supreme beast to appear in the training ground. "I wonder how a supreme beast tastes like?" Bu Fong muttered as he looked at the gigantic one-legged toad. He took a bite of the roast meat, causing the oil to splatter everywhere. Apart from the plump dog in front of his house, this was the first time he saw a supreme beast. Therefore, he couldn't help but feel curious. Duan Yun glanced at Bu Fong speechlessly. Did this guy only think about eating? A supreme beast was invincible in the training ground. Even the disciples of the big sects wouldn't dare to underestimate a supreme beast. How could such an existence be reduced to food? Duan Yun took a bite of the earth dragon roast meat. He had completely forgotten that the earth dragon meat in his hand was also the meat of an 8th grade spirit beast. The appearance of the heaven and earth obsidian flame has indeed attracted many experts. This one-legged supreme beast actually traveled tens of thousands of miles to come here. Look over there. Duan Yun pointed. There were many people sitting cross-legged on the back of the supreme beast. Moreover, there was a streak of sword light streaking across the sky like a shooting star. There were experts riding on their swords. These people who dared to covet the heaven and earth obsidian flame were undoubtedly supreme being experts. I didn't expect that there would be so many supreme beings in the training ground. This is going to be difficult. Duan Yun felt a headache coming on as he ate the roast meat. Bufang didn't pay any attention to Duan Yun, who was muttering to himself as he leisurely walked toward the location. He had to obtain the 10,000 bestial flames, the heaven and earth obsidian flame. Only with this flame could his culinary skills improve. A good flame with spirituality could bestow spirituality to ingredient. This would be of great help to Bufang's culinary skills. Duan Yun sighed and followed after him. 2 people and a puppet walked quickly. Since they had a specific target this time, with their cultivations, it didn't take them long to reach their destination. When they arrived at their destination, they discovered that many people had already started fighting over the 10,000 bestial flames. Chapter 345. Bei Gongming saw the golden flames from afar. The flames were incomparably dazzling and emitted raging heat. Even though he was still quite a distance away, Bei Gongming could still feel the rich spiritual energy in the air as the flames burned. This was not just an ordinary flame, but a flame of spiritual energy. It was a flame with spirituality. This was the heaven and earth obsidian flame. Bei Gongming was extremely excited. If he could fuse with this heaven and earth obsidian flame, then his cultivation would definitely break through to the intermediate supreme being stage. He might even become a peak supreme being. Moreover, with the heaven and earth obsidian flame in hand, his fighting capacity would be even more formidable. In the faction, he would definitely stand out. If he was given a few more years to refine the heaven and earth obsidian flame, he would even have the confidence to step into the superior supreme stage. At that time, he could be considered an outstanding figure among the younger generation, to become the leader of the younger generation. Therefore, in the face of this heaven and earth obsidian flame, he could not resist the greed in his heart. Just as he was about to charge towards the golden flames, a cry rang out and a flame spurted out from the flaming bird in front of him. This was the scorching sun bird, a type of spirit beast that lived in the land of Yang. On the back of the scorching sun bird sat the chubby old man, Yi Yunqing. The heaven and earth obsidian flames were suppressed by the clear sky pagoda. Now that someone had come to snatch the 10,000 bestial flames, as an elder of the clear sky pagoda, Yi Yunqing naturally would not allow it. The supremacy of the trial ground. Those who stand in my way will be killed. Bei Gongming only had the heaven and earth obsidian flame in his eyes. He glanced at Yi Yunqing and grinned coldly. His cultivation was very strong. Although he was not at the top of the younger generation in the sect, he was not weak and had some fame. Moreover, he was very confident. He didn't place Yi Yunqing in his eyes at all. In his eyes, the supreme beings of the trial ground were nothing more than a bunch of country bumpkins. The people in the trial grounds were a group of slaves raised by their sects to raise the strength of their sect's disciples. If a slave dared to attack his master, then he could go to hell. Boom! Bei Gongming started to circulate his cultivation technique, and a pair of white wings of light suddenly extended from his back. The wings of light unfurled, and many feathers formed from spiritual energy fluttered down. Buzz! With a loud explosion, Bei Gongming's body shot out like a bolt of lightning toward Yi Yunqing. Both of them were supreme beings. However, Yi Yunqing was merely a primary supreme being. After his first clash with Bei Gongming, his entire body was sent flying like a bomb. He fiercely slammed into the ground and shattered a small hill into pieces. Bei Gongming laughed coldly. His face was ice cold. His cultivation method was of a much higher level than Yi Yunqing's. Naturally, he could crush Yi Yunqing easily. The heaven and earth obsidian flame must be mine. This is an opportunity that belongs to me. Bei Gongming flapped his wings and stood proudly in the sky, laughing. Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air could be heard. Numerous experts from the Clear Sky Pagoda rushed over. Among them, there was also a supreme being expert with an extremely powerful cultivation. He drew his bow and shot an arrow. The arrow brought with it a dazzling radiance as it shot towards Bei Gongming. The people from the Clear Sky Pagoda were proficient in archery. Their arrows were extremely powerful. However, Bei Gongming's cultivation was even stronger. It was unknown what those wings of light were, but they were incomparably sturdy. They enveloped his entire body, and the light arrows shot by the Clear Sky Pagoda expert exploded upon contact with them. The disciples who came with Bei Gongming also shot out and engaged in a fierce battle with the experts from the Clear Sky Pagoda. These people came from outside the southern region. Their cultivation methods were of a higher level. Although their cultivation levels weren't very high, they were able to fight against opponents of a higher level. Although the disciples from the Clear Sky Pagoda had the advantage in numbers, they were still suppressed and forced to retreat. In terms of high-end combat power, the Clear Sky Pagoda was completely crushed. Bei Gongming seemed to have gone mad. With a flap of his wings of light, his entire body flashed like a shooting star. The two primary supreme beings from the Clear Sky Pagoda were completely crushed, and their auras fluctuated unsteadily. "Grandfather, Xiling is here to help you." All of a sudden, a thunderous roar resounded from the depths of the forest. An arrow wrapped in lightning bolts shot toward Bei Gongming like a shooting star. Its target was Bei Gongming, who had unfurled his wings of light. Bei Gongming's hair fluttered in the wind, and his expression turned serious. He punched out and shattered the lightning arrow. However, his entire body was also blasted far away by a tremendous force, and his fist was a little numb. A semi-divine tool? Bei Gongming's pupils constricted. In the midst of the forest, a graceful figure wielding a blue longbow could be seen. Lightning arrows converged on the bow. Yi Xiling's heroic spirit surged. She loosened her slender fingers, and the lightning arrow whistled through the air once again. This was the semi-divine tool of the Clear Sky Pagoda, the Thunder Rush Bow. Bei Gongming let out a long howl. Even though it was a semi-divine tool, he didn't fear it in the slightest. He continued to suppress the two Supreme Being expert. Bang! The place where the flames erupted was a sunken pit. Flames flickered within the pit, and pillars of spirit energy shot up into the sky. Roars suddenly resounded throughout the 100,000 mountains. Everyone in the midst of the chaotic battle was startled. Then, they saw spirit beasts with blood-red eyes crawling out of the deep pit. These spirit beasts all emitted an extremely irritable aura. The people in the midst of the chaotic battle split up and began to deal with these irritable spirit beasts. The number of spirit beasts was uncountable. Most of them were low-grade spirit beasts, but there were also many 6th and 7th grade spirit beasts. As for 8th grade spirit beasts, they were the overlords of a region. Although they were few in number, they were still present. The number of spirit beasts was simply too great. In an instant, the surrounding area was plunged into a chaotic battle. Cries resounded through the air. 2 intense sun-birds flew out of the pit of fire. The experts of the Clear Sky Pagoda were startled. The beasts are beginning to riot. It seems like the 10,000 bestial flames are about to come out, on top of a towering tree. The barefooted high priestess and the black-robed Shura sect overlord spoke calmly. The departed soul orbs in their hands emitted a dense gray radiance as they absorbed the wailing spirit essences and remnant souls in the air. Some of these remnant souls belonged to spirit beasts, while others belonged to humans. It was all in their favor. Above the vault of heaven, a silhouette that blotted out the sun suddenly appeared. A gigantic foot descended from the vault of heaven and ruthlessly stomped on the ground around the pit of fire. Frightening waves of air spread out in all directions, killing many low-grade spirit beasts. The 9th-grade supreme beast, the one-legged toad, had finally appeared. The one-legged toad was incomparably huge. Its 2 large eyeballs rolled around. All of a sudden, the croak of the toad resounded like a thunderclap. Countless spirit beasts exploded amidst the croak, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Even many humans were sent flying by this croak, spitting out blood. Bei Gongming's eyes were filled with ruthlessness. He flapped his luminous wings and hovered in the air. The 2 supreme being experts of the Clear Sky Pagoda were also hovering in the air, battered and exhausted. They were extremely fearful of this gigantic one-legged toad supreme beast. Its combat prowess was simply too terrifying. Just as the might of the one-legged toad was spreading in all directions, a scarlet fire dragon slowly crawled out from the pit of fire. Its entire body seemed to be ablaze with flames, and the might of a dragon enveloped the area. It was incomparably terrifying. Another supreme beast. Moreover, it was the guardian spirit beast of the heaven and earth obsidian flames. At this moment, 2 supreme beasts had already appeared. A sword light flashed past. An imposing figure stepped on his sword and calmly hovered in the air. A white-robed, white-haired, white-browed elder also stepped on the air. His back was hunched as he watched from afar. Hiss, hiss, hiss in the distance, atop an ancient tree, a wriggling figure coiled around the trunk of the tree. The figure soared up and gazed ahead. It was actually a serpent woman. Moreover, it was a serpent woman. Her green hair fluttered in the wind, and her face was so beautiful that it could take one's breath away. Even the Serpentine Sovereign rushed over from afar. The White Cloud Villa's Villa Master, Wu Mu, chuckled as he rode on his semi-divine tool, the cloud-rising sword. He gazed at the beautiful Serpentine Sovereign with a complicated gaze. Oh my God! Why are there so many Supreme Being experts here? There are even 2 Supreme Beasts. How are we going to collect the 10,000 bestial flames? Duan Yun stared blankly at the experts who had appeared in the sky. The auras of these experts were incomparably powerful, and every single one of them made him shudder in fear. These were all Supreme Being experts, and Duan Yun was no match for them. Duan Yun was so anxious that he even forgot to eat his roasted meat. He didn't expect that there would be so many Supreme Beings in the training ground. With so many Supreme Beings here, he didn't even have the slightest chance of obtaining the heaven and earth obsidian flames. He had miscalculated. Bufang remained calm. The heaven and earth obsidian flames were extremely precious, so it wasn't strange for them to attract so many Supreme Being experts. Leaning against a towering tree, Bufang calmly ate his roasted meat while observing the situation in the training ground. As time passed, the solemn atmosphere in the air became even more intense. The flames within the pit of fire also became increasingly scorching hot. Chapter 346. Croak. The gigantic one-legged toad let out a croak, and everyone felt their hearts skip a beat. This was the might of a supreme beast. Each and every one of its movements could cause a change in one's state of mind. Numerous spirit beasts crawled out of the fire pit, and many other spirit beasts emerged from the surroundings of the forest. In an instant, the surroundings of the pit of fire turned into a world of spirit beasts. It was as if the crowd was surrounded by a tide of spirit beasts. The experts of the Clear Sky Pagoda didn't pay much attention to this tide of spirit beasts. Having lived in the 100,000 mountains, they had witnessed spirit beast tides since they were young. They were no longer surprised by it. Moreover, they were well aware that the appearance of the tide of spirit beasts was caused by the 10,000 bestial flames, which had cut off the 100,000 mountains' dragon vein. The energy of the dragon vein was the source of spirit energy in the mountains. Spirit beasts needed spirit energy for their cultivation. Every time the 10,000 bestial flames went berserk, the source of spirit energy in the 100,000 mountains would be cut off. As a result, the surrounding spirit beasts had to rush to the pit of fire to exchange for spirit energy. Once the spirit energy of the spirit beasts entered the pit of fire, it would be cleansed by the 10,000 bestial flames. Then, it would spew out spirit energy. This spirit energy was extremely dense and pure. To the spirit beasts with low intelligence, it was like a drug that they couldn't stop. This was the origin of the 10,000 bestial flames. It absorbed the spirit energy of the numerous spirit beasts in the 100,000 mountains and formed the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Its might was unparalleled. Even though the densely packed spiritual beasts had completely surrounded the area, everyone present had high cultivations. They were all top-notch supreme being experts from the various major forces. Naturally, they were not afraid of the spiritual beast. When one of the spirit beasts let out a deep roar and began to spit out essence energy at the fire pit, the other spirit beasts followed suit and began to spit out their own essence energy. This essence chi was a little misty, even a little hazy, like a layer of fog. It wasn't obvious when one spirit beast spat out spirit energy, but it was obvious when hundreds of spirit beasts spat out spirit energy, not to mention when tens of thousands of spirit beasts spat out spirit energy at the same time. The spirit energy that soared into the sky was so dense that it almost turned into liquid and dripped down. These essences floated above the fire pit like a layer of mist, slowly moving. Suddenly, a huge suction force gushed out from the fire pit. Then, the essence energy was slowly sucked into the fire pit at a speed visible to the naked eye. In a short while, it was completely absorbed. This peculiar scene caused everyone to hold their breaths, anticipating what would happen next. Surging golden flames slowly rose from the fire pit. Around the golden flames, there was a formless beast roar. The beast's roar sounded like a dragon's roar, a tiger's roar, an eagle's cry. The roars of hundreds of beasts were included in it. It was very strange. Furthermore, the shape of the golden flame was also constantly changing. Sometimes it was a lion, sometimes it was a fierce tiger, and sometimes it was a meandering dragon. These scenes endowed the flame with a different spirituality. This flame seemed to have absorbed the spirit of tens of thousands of beasts to form its own truth of fire, which was the heaven and earth obsidian flame. Therefore, the difference between a heaven and earth obsidian flame and an alchemic fire, or an ordinary flame, was the spirituality of the flame. Bei Gongming's pupils reflected the 10,000 bestial flames, or more specifically, the seed of the 10,000 bestial flames. At this moment, the 10,000 bestial flames had just been born. It wasn't like some of the older heaven and earth obsidian flames that could incinerate anything. His flame energy wasn't huge, so he still had to carefully nurture it. Bei Gongming wanted the 10,000 bestial flames because only with it could his strength improve tremendously. The temptation of this flame was too great. The wings of light behind him flapped. Ignoring the surrounding supreme beings, Bei Gongming transformed into a bolt of lightning and sped toward the resplendent 10,000 bestial flames. He wanted to snatch the 10,000 bestial flames before anyone else. However, just as he made his move, Yi Yunqing, who had been paying attention to him, also made his move. Surging true energy erupted from their bodies. Yi Yunqing caught the thunder sprint bow that Yi Xiling had tossed over. This was a semi-divine tool. A semi-divine tool in the hands of a supreme being expert would possess boundless might. A bolt of lightning shot out, but it suddenly stimulated everyone present. The gigantic one-legged toad rolled its eyes and stared at Yi Yunqing and Bei Gongming. Then, it opened its mouth and flicked its tongue. An inexplicable sound of something piercing through the air rang out. There was almost no sound of friction between the tongue and the air. Boom boom! However, Bei Gongming and Yi Yunqing were extremely vigilant. The two of them moved swiftly in the air and managed to dodge the one-legged toad's tongue attack. The one-legged toad croaked and swiped its gigantic claws at the two of them. In the eyes of the gigantic one-legged toad, the two of them were as insignificant as mosquitoes. Bei Gongming and Yi Yunqing were enraged. How could they be intimidated by a mere supreme being toad? Both of them charged toward the gigantic toad. Just like that, two humans and one beast engaged in a fierce battle. Dazzling rays of light shone in all directions. Boom boom boom! A scarlet fire dragon crawled out from the pit. Its cultivation had also reached the supreme being level. The fire dragon roared and spewed out billowing flames from its mouth. Its might was astonishing. Rip! A beam of sword light descended from the sky and headed straight for the 10,000 bestial flames. A surging and sharp sword intent instantly surged out and enveloped the surroundings. The fire dragon roared and spewed out flames. It flapped its wings and soared into the sky. It glared at Wu Mu with a murderous look in its eyes. Although the Serpentine Sovereign had the body of a snake, her speed of movement was extremely fast. The Serpentine Sovereign had a face that was more exquisite than most human beauties. Her green hair wriggled in the air like tiny snakes. Her gigantic serpent tail swayed from side to side as she moved at high speed. Her target was also the 10,000 bestial flames. For serpent people, the 10,000 bestial flames was even more important. As serpent people, they had to molt every time they wanted to make a breakthrough. As their cultivation grew stronger, the amount of energy required to molt also increased. The amount of energy required for the Serpentine Sovereign to molt was unimaginable. After all, the Serpentine Sovereign was already a supreme being expert. If she wanted to break through to a higher realm, she had to molt. Once she succeeded, her cultivation would rise to the next level. The Serpentine Sovereign also needed a catalyst to molt, and that was the 10,000 bestial flames. The remaining Supreme Being expert from the Clear Sky Pagoda also made his move. He couldn't just watch as the Serpentine Sovereign snatched away the 10,000 bestial flames. At the same time, the Wildlands expert on top of the one-legged toad's head also charged out. A chaotic battle broke out in an instant. Moreover, it was a battle between Supreme Being experts. Bufang and Duan Yun watched from afar. They were also surrounded by a group of spirit beasts, so not even a drop of water could trickle through. That was why they were standing on top of a tree. They weren't far from the pit of fire. Everyone was also caught in an undeserved calamity. Several spirit beasts roared and pounced at them. With a flick of his mind, Duan Yun's alchemic fire surged and transformed into streaks of flames around his body. As the streaks of flames shuttled back and forth, they obliterated the spirit beasts one after another. Duan Yun's combat prowess was very strong. After all, he possessed a special alchemic fire. His alchemic fire couldn't compare to a heaven and earth obsidian flame, but it was much stronger than ordinary flames. It was even easier for Bufang to deal with these spirit beasts. Or rather, he couldn't be bothered to deal with them. As the green smoke curled up, the pitch-black dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. With a flick of his fingers, the dragon bone kitchen knife twirled in his hand as he easily twirled it. A terrifying dragons might burst forth from the dragon bone kitchen knife. The spirit beasts that were midway toward him were so frightened that they wet their pants and fell to the ground with a thud. Therefore, not a single spirit beast was able to approach Bufang. Duan Yun was once again dumbfounded. What kind of technique is this time? He merely twirled his knife and scared the spirit beasts? How could he be so showy? The densely packed spirit beasts continued to roar and howl. The essence energy they spat out became increasingly dense and surged into the golden flames. After being baptized, the essence energy was transformed into majestic spirit energy that gushed out and nourished the spirit beast. As the process progressed, the golden flame's radiance became increasingly resplendent. It was so resplendent that it resembled a blooming flower bud. Leaves fell one after another, and a small bundle of pale golden flames was clustered at the forefront. The seed of the 10,000 bestial flames had finally appeared. The Shura sect overlord, Duan Ling, who had been standing motionless in the distance, suddenly lit up. A terrifying aura erupted from his body in an instant. This aura was like a raging gale that engulfed everything in its path. Everyone who was engaged in battle was startled. The Shura sect overlord gazed at the spiritual flame that hovered above the other bundles of flames. His eyes were filled with desire and excitement. His entire body trembled with excitement. He took a step forward, treading on the void, and slowly walked towards the flame. Chapter 347. The seed of the 10,000 bestial flames floated quietly in the air. It was exquisite, small, peaceful, and beautiful. It was like a harmless flower bud, quietly hovering in the air, emitting a brilliant radiance. Many warriors who were engaged in battle gazed at the cluster of flames. In an instant, their hearts were filled with excitement. That was the goal of their trip, the seed of the 10,000 bestial flames. As long as they could obtain this heaven and earth obsidian flames, many of their cultivations would receive a huge boost. As a disciple of a sect located outside of the southern region, Bei Gongming also attached great importance to this heaven and earth obsidian flames. This was a rare treasure of heaven and earth. No matter where it was placed, it would be an eye-catching treasure. The Shura's Gate overlord's aura erupted like a raging storm, causing everyone present to feel a wave of pressure. This pressure made everyone's heart sink. The warriors of the Clear Sky Pagoda stared at the Shura sect overlord with solemn expressions. Facing this legendary figure who stirred up the winds and clouds of the southern region, everyone's hearts were filled with apprehension. "Stop right there. This heaven and earth obsidian flames belongs to me, Bei Gongming." Bei Gongming saw the Shura sect overlord Duan Ling approaching the resplendent 10,000 bestial flames. His eyes instantly turned bloodshot. He bellowed and punched at the Shura sect overlord. Buzz, the Shura sect overlord calmly glanced at Bei Gongming and took a step forward. In an instant, his figure had crossed several feet. Pitch-black true energy appeared around his body. This true energy seemed to be able to distort the air around him. Bei Gongming's punch arrived in front of the Shura sect overlord. However, it was smoothed out by an invisible force. His punch, which contained the true energy of a supreme being, was dispersed just like that. Bei Gongming's heart skipped a beat. His punch was not weak at all, yet the black-robed man before him easily withstood it. Was this really the country bumpkin supreme being of the training ground? Duan Ling lifted his head. His eyes were as cold as ice. Traces of murderous intent slowly circulated around his body. Anyone who dared to snatch the 10,000 bestial flames from him must die. The 10,000 bestial flames must be his. Boom! As Duan Ling stomped down, the air seemed to tremble from his stomp. A surging wave of energy spread out. Then, Duan Ling's figure flashed and appeared in front of Bei Gongming. Their eyes met. Bei Gongming's eyes were filled with confidence and disdain, while Duan Ling's eyes were filled with ice-cold killing intent. A mere supreme martial artist of the trial grounds sure has guts. Bei Gongming widened his eyes and the aura on his body rose steadily. His cultivation method revolved faster and faster, causing his aura to become even stronger. Training grounds. Duan Ling's eyes, which were filled with killing intent, froze for a moment. Then, the corners of his mouth curled up. "Are you from the Grand Baron sect?" Bei Gongming's heart skipped a beat and his mind became chaotic. How did this person know about the Grand Baron sect? "Who are you?" Bei Gongming roared as he hurled the ball of light in his hand. Duan Ling curled his lips in disdain and swiped his claw, which was suffused with true energy. The ball of light was immediately shattered by his claw. Terrifying energy gushed out and exploded between the two of them. A figure was ruthlessly smashed down from the sky and slammed into the ground with a loud bang, causing the entire ground to tremble. The disciples of the Grand Baron sect are still so conceited. It really pisses me off. Duan Ling cracked his neck. The black robe on his body was also torn apart by the explosion, revealing the silver armor on his body. The armor emitted a silver glow and peculiar waves of true energy, giving off an immense pressure. With a flick of his finger, a stream of true energy shot toward the direction where Bei Gongming was sent flying. Then, Duan Ling shifted his target to the 10,000 bestial flames. The 10,000 bestial flames was a heaven and earth obsidian flame. It was extremely important to him. The departed soul orb was a semi-divine tool of the Shura sect. However, this semi-divine tool was very peculiar. Unlike other semi-divine tools, it did not have sufficient offensive capabilities. To the disciples of the Shura sect, the departed soul orb was the best divine tool for cultivation. Once the hundreds of thousands of spiritual essences and remnant souls were refined by the heaven and earth obsidian flame, the surging spirit energy would be fed back to the owner of the departed soul orb and aid him in his breakthrough. Duan Ling's current cultivation level was at the peak of the Supreme Being realm. If he wanted to break through to the Supreme Being realm, he would have to take the risk and use this method. The spirit energy in the southern region was too scarce. If he wanted to cultivate to the Supreme Being realm under normal circumstances, it would take him a long time. He did not have that much time to waste. A sword chime resounded through the air. The sword beam shot out and forced back the scarlet fire dragon that was crawling out of the pit of fire. The White Cloud Villa Master, Wu Mu, pointed his cloud-rising sword at Duan Ling. He could not let the Shura sect demon obtain the 10,000 bestial flames. He had to stop him. In the distance, the white-haired and white-browed Supreme Elder of the Celestial Arcanum sect finally made his move. Several jade talismans appeared in his hands. He injected several streams of true energy into the talismans and they flew toward the Shura sect overlord, Duan Ling Celestial Arcanum Demon Array. The Supreme Elder's aged and solemn voice reverberated through the air. Wu Mu also let out a roar. Thousands of sword beams rained down from the sky like a waterfall. River-piercing sword. The combined attack of the two Supreme Being warriors was aimed at the Shura sect overlord, Duan Ling. A terrifying pressure filled the air, forcing many to retreat. This was a battle between the true top experts of the southern region. Regardless of whether it was the Shura sect overlord or the Supreme Elder of the Celestial Arcanum sect, they were both experts who stood at the pinnacle of the southern region. Bei Gongming crawled out of the ruins in a sorry state. He gazed at the battle in the sky with an incredulous look in his eyes. Why are there so many Supreme Being warriors at the peak of the Supreme Being realm in this training ground? Damn it! Even though Bei Gongming was a disciple of the Grand Baron sect, his current cultivation level was only at the mid-stage of the Supreme Being realm. How was it possible that there were so many Supreme Beings at the peak of the Supreme Being realm in this training ground, which he viewed as a backward and barbaric place? Numerous jade talismans blossomed in the sky, forming a gigantic magic array. This magic array enveloped the Shura sect overlord, turning the area pitch black, as if it had transformed into the night sky. Shooting stars streaked across the night sky. Each of the jade talismans was occupied by a resplendent star. The river of sword chi descended from the sky. It didn't damage the magic array in the slightest as it headed straight for Duan Ling, who was enveloped by the magic array. As the river of sword chi entered the magic array, it seemed to have received a great boost. Its might actually became several times stronger. Old man from the Celestial Arcanum sect. You can't stop me this time. Duan Ling coldly stared at the white-haired and white-browed Supreme Elder of the Celestial Arcanum sect. With a roar, all the true energy in his body soared up into the sky. The pitch-black true energy formed a tornado, engulfing the sword energy that was pouring down on him. The scene suddenly became somewhat spectacular. The river of sword chi mixed with the pitch-black true energy was like a roaring wind dragon, shocking everyone's eyes. Bang! A loud explosion resounded. Amidst the roaring tornado, a figure tore through the air like a beam of light. He tore a hole in the magic array and dashed toward the location of the 10,000 bestial flames. The Supreme Elder bellowed angrily. Wu Mu also brandished his sword and chased after the figure. A delicate shout rang out from the void. Numerous blood-colored jade talismans rained down from the sky. They seemed to transform into a heavenly net that blotted out the sky and blocked the Supreme Elder and Wu Mu's path. The High Priestess of the Shura sect had made her move. Damn it! You demonic woman! Wu Mu was enraged. He slashed out with his sword. The sword light was like a dragon, bombarding the blood-colored jade talisman net. This demonic woman is proficient in magic arrays. She is a Supreme Being magic array master. Let me deal with her. The Supreme Elder of the Celestial Arcanum sect had a solemn expression on his face. With a flip of his wrist, a white jade talisman appeared. He crushed it and scattered it toward a spot in the blood-colored jade talisman net. Soon, an opening appeared in the net. Wu Mu nodded and rode on his sword. He passed through the jade talisman net and chased after the Shura sect overlord. The High Priestess wanted to stop him, but the Supreme Elder stopped her. The two magic array masters began to collide with each other in the void. The flames burned fiercely. As they approached, the temperature became higher and higher. Duan Ling stared at the 10,000 bestial flames with excitement and greed. The 10,000 bestial flames had just taken shape, so its might wasn't strong. If it were a fully matured heaven and earth obsidian flame, they wouldn't even be able to approach it. He took out the grayish-white departed soul orb and held it in one hand. The departed soul orb was filled with dense smoke. Every wisp of smoke was a soul essence. Upon closer inspection, one could even see distorted and ferocious human faces. Duan Ling's mind was connected to the departed soul orb. He could feel the desire coming from the orb. He pinched his hands together and the departed soul orb transformed into a white beam of light. It floated above the 10,000 bestial flames and emitted a surging spirit essence. A beam of sword energy descended from the heavens. Duan Ling's face turned cold. He didn't try to dodge it and forcefully took the attack head-on. He couldn't dodge it. If he did, the sword energy would destroy the departed soul orb. You want to die? I'll grant you your wish. Pitch-black true energy pervaded the air. Duan Ling suddenly turned his head and charged toward Wu Mu with a surging killing intent. The two of them engaged in a fierce battle in the void. The 10,000 bestial flames pulsed silently. The departed soul orb hovering above Duan Ling continued to emit spirit essence. The spirit essence was incinerated and transformed into wisps of spirit energy that converged within the departed soul orb. Bufang stuffed the last piece of roasted meat into his mouth. His mouth was covered in grease. The taste of the roasted earth dragon meat was indeed delicious. The texture of an 8th-grade spirit beast was not bad at all. Duan Yun no longer held any hope for the 10,000 bestial flames. He held the roasted earth dragon meat in his hands and sat to the side. He ate as if there was nothing left to live for. He wanted to turn his sadness into appetite and savor this delicacy to his heart's content. Bufang looked at Duan Yun and then at the frightening battle between supreme beings taking place in the distance. The monstrous flames illuminated his face. The corners of his mouth curled up stiffly on his gaunt face. Bufang exhaled softly and stood up. He patted Xiao Bai's plump belly, then strode toward the distance. Xiao Bai rubbed his round head. A glint flashed in his red eyes as he followed behind Bufang. A man and a puppet dashed toward the location where the supreme beings were fighting. Duan Yun watched in a daze. A piece of roasted meat fell from his mouth. Are you out of your mind? There are so many supreme beings fighting. What is a 7th grade battle saint like you doing there? Chapter 348. Which 7th grade battle saint wouldn't stay far away from such a battle? Stop right there. The heaven and earth obsidian flame isn't something you can touch. Get lost. Bei Gongming coldly shouted at Bufang, stopping him from moving forward. What are you trying to do? Bei Gongming squinted his eyes. Even though he was in a sorry state, his gaze was still sharp. After all, the pressure of a 9th grade supreme being was still there. If Bufang was alone, he was just a 7th grade battle saint. In the eyes of a supreme being, he was nothing more than an ant. Thus, he wouldn't attract too much attention. The supreme being fire dragon that crawled out of the pit roared and aimed straight at Bufang. Find a place to play by yourself. Wait for my instructions, Bufang lightly said as he patted Xiao Bai's plump belly. The heaven and earth obsidian flame belonged to him, Bei Gongming. No one could take it away from him. After walking a few steps, he finally arrived in front of the giant pit of fire. In the future, no one would be able to cook such delicious roasted meat, because at this moment, Bufang didn't conceal his true energy. The aura of a 7th grade battle saint flowed around his body. Naturally, Bei Gongming could see through it at a glance. As for whether or not he would attract the attention of the supreme beings when he got close to the 10,000 bestial flames, that would have to wait and see. However, just as he finished speaking, he felt his scalp go numb. Just as he got up, he fell to the ground again. This time, he couldn't even get up. He was knocked unconscious. That wasn't snatching a fortuitous encounter, but suicide. Bei Gongming felt a gust of wind blowing toward him. He widened his eyes in bewilderment as he stared at the black wak flying toward his face. Before he could finish speaking, the black wak smacked his head. This was a fortuitous encounter that belonged to him. As Bufang's cultivation level increased, Xiao Bai's battle prowess also rose to the middle stage of 9th grade. Why would a mere 7th grade battle saint like him join in the fun? If I say get lost, then get lost. Don't talk so much nonsense, or else I'll kill you, Bei Gongming coldly said. Heaven and earth treasures belong to the fated. You snatch yours, I snatch mine, but you must provoke me. Duan Yun slumped to the ground in a dispirited manner. He took a bite of the barbecued meat and savored the rich fragrance of the delicious barbecued meat in the air. However, he felt a little sorrowful in his heart. His arm, which was pressing on Bufang's shoulder, actually failed to pull this 7th grade battle saint away. He was a supreme being. Although he was heavily injured, he was still a supreme being. In the end, the Azura's Gate Overlord had flung a stream of true energy at him, nearly crippling him. Don't make a fuss. Treasures of heaven and earth belong to those who are fated to get them. Naturally, I can give it a try, Bufang said. Even though the Shura sect Overlord was at the peak of the supreme being level, he came from outside the southern region after all. He definitely had his own methods. He hesitated for a moment, then shouted toward Bufang's gradually disappearing figure. He felt that he had to stop Bufang. He didn't want to watch Bufang throw away his life without doing anything. Bufang waved the black turtle constellation wak. He shot a glance at the unconscious Bei Gongming and curled the corners of his mouth. Bufang was now a 7th grade battle saint. Even though Xiao Bai had already reached the peak of 9th grade, there were still ranks within the 9th grade. How could he be ignored by a trash 7th grade battle saint in the training ground? Especially, this kid's target seemed to be the heaven and earth obsidian flame floating in the sky. Previously, he still had some interest in the heaven and earth obsidian flame, but now, he had no interest in it at all. Didn't he see so many Supreme Being experts fighting over it? With his cultivation level, he would probably be smashed to the ground by a large group of Supreme Beings the moment he rushed in. Roar. At this moment, Bei Gongming had long lost his heroic spirit. He was in a sorry state, and his body was covered with wounds. The bridge of his nose was slightly twisted, and a scarlet snake was trickling down from it. Xiao Bai was dumbfounded. Then, he stood still and turned around, guarding Bufang's back like a boulder. However, it was precisely because he had seen through Bufang's plan that he was confused. Black smoke curled around Bufang's right hand. A black wok gradually floated up and landed in his hand. Bufang knitted his brows. He turned around and expressionlessly looked at Bei Gongming, who was looking at him with disdain. How could he be ignored by Bei Gongming? Bufang wasn't that foolish. Bufang stopped after taking 2 steps. He widened his eyes and stared at the figure who suddenly crawled up from the ground. Of course, even if he couldn't snatch it, a mere 7th-grade battle saint didn't have the qualifications to covet the heaven and earth obsidian flame. In the distance, the sound of rubble falling resounded. A figure covered in blood and in a sorry state crawled out from the rubble. Beneath the pit of fire was surging magma, and a monstrous heat gushed out from it. A piece of barbecued meat fell to the ground. Duan Yun, who had just regained his senses, felt his heart ache for a long time. Just like how Xiao Bai was suppressed by the Shura sect's venerable, Xiao Bai only had the combat prowess of an elementary 9th-grade battle saint. Therefore, Bufang planned to let Xiao Bai distract a supreme being while he went over in a low-profile manner. There was indeed something wrong with this guy's head. Bufang nodded his head. He gripped the dragon bone kitchen knife and walked toward the pit of fire, which was spewing monstrous flames. Bei Gongming's face froze. He turned his head to look at Bufang. At the same time, Bufang also slowly turned his head, and their eyes met. Wasn't this the biggest joke in the world? Bufang glanced at Bei Gongming and curled up the corners of his mouth. He didn't pay any attention to this ragged guy and walked straight toward the pit of fire. As expected, he was an idiot who had lost his mind due to temptation. Bei Gongming was already holding back his anger. Now that he was being ignored by this brat, he was about to explode from anger. A mere 7th-grade battle saint would be incinerated into ashes the moment he came into contact with the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Bufang held the pitch-black dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand. With the innate dragon might of the dragon bone kitchen knife, the spirit beasts in the surroundings were tactful and didn't come looking for trouble with Bufang. Fortunately, his cultivation level was extremely high. He managed to hang on to his last breath of true energy and didn't die under the bombardment of the true energy. Even though Xiao Bai could take a beating, Bufang couldn't guarantee that he could withstand the bombardment of so many Supreme Being experts. Along with the movement of his arm, the black wok gradually grew bigger. Soon, it became the size of a human. A 7th-grade battle saint actually wanted to lay his hands on the heaven and earth obsidian flames? Occasionally, there would be some bewildered spirit beasts pouncing toward Bufang. However, they were all smashed away by Xiao Bai's fist. However, what made him feel even more incredulous was that Bufang actually walked toward the place where the group of supreme beings were fighting. When Bei Gongming saw Bufang, he was also somewhat dumbfounded. Bufang couldn't be bothered with Bei Gongming, who was knocked unconscious by his wok. His gaze shifted toward the blazing heaven and earth obsidian flames. However, his shout was quickly drowned out by the rumbling of the Supreme Being's battle. He was unable to call back Bufang's figure. This figure's aura was weak, and he was gasping for breath. However, this wasn't the main point. Swoosh! What kind of grudge did he have against Bufang? Bei Gongming let out a whimper as his whole body was sent flying away. His figure suddenly shot out and landed in the distance. The disdain on Bei Gongming's face became even more apparent. Was he hallucinating, or was there something wrong with this kid's head? At that moment, he felt as though a bottle of 5 flavors had been knocked over. A mess of flavors gushed into his mouth. He heard a crisp cracking sound and felt a sharp pain on the bridge of his nose. Swoosh! Bei Gongming lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. Instantly, he appeared beside Bufang with a swoosh. With so many supreme beings present, if Bufang wanted to rely on Xiao Bai to snatch the 10,000 bestial flames, it was no different from a fool's dream. Heaven and earth treasures belonged to the fated. However, how could a 7th grade supreme being like Bufang be considered a fated one? Could he withstand the dreadful might of the heaven and earth obsidian flames? According to Bufang, if he couldn't even come into contact with it, how could he possibly obtain it? What the F***ck? He pressed down on Bufang's shoulder and wanted to pull this troublesome 7th grade battle saint to the side. Without the slightest precaution or apprehension, Bei Gongming kissed the black turtle constellation, walk face to face. Xiao Bai's chubby figure followed beside Bufang. One man and one puppet rapidly traversed through the valley, slowly moving toward the location of the fire pit. A 7th grade battle saint came to a place where so many supreme beings were fighting? A dragon's roar resounded. Above Bufang's head, a giant head slowly drooped down. 2 enormous lantern-like eyes stared at him. If he brought Xiao Bai along, he would be too obvious a target. Moreover, Xiao Bai's battle prowess wasn't any weaker than a supreme being's. It would easily attract the attention of those supreme beings who were fighting. Chapter 349. The one-legged toad was a supreme beast from the wildlands. Its strength was terrifying, and it was the overlord of the wildlands. Even the godly temple of the wildlands didn't dare to offend this one-legged toad. They had come to the 100,000 mountains to fight for the heaven and earth obsidian flames after discussing with each other. As a supreme beast, its combat prowess was naturally terrifying. Every time it croaked, the people around it would feel their hearts tremble. The enormous one-legged toad swung its arms. Every time it slapped down, the ground would shake. The serpentine sovereign swayed her serpent tail. Her serpent tail was different from the ordinary serpent people's tails in the illusory spirit swamp. Her serpent tail was green, and the scales on it were like emerald green gems. It was a dazzling sight. The serpentine sovereign had a voluptuous figure. Her waist was slender, and her speed of movement was extremely fast. Because the serpentine sovereign was too slippery, the one-legged toad found it difficult to deal with her. The irascible one-legged toad leaped high into the air and stomped down. However, it didn't manage to trample the serpentine sovereign to death. The serpentine sovereign's spiraling figure abruptly sprung forward. Her beautiful face carried a tinge of loveliness and coldness. Suddenly, her bright red lips opened and she slowly pulled out a bone whip that had been pieced together from her throat. With her green hair fluttering in the wind, the serpentine sovereign's red lips curled up slightly. Then, she dashed forward and swung the bone whip, leaving numerous wounds on the one-legged toad's leg. The injured one-legged toad became more and more irascible. The two of them engaged in a fierce battle, causing endless booms. The warriors of the godly temple of the wildlands and the clear sky pagoda were fighting. There were supreme being warriors and 8th grade war gods on both sides. As they exchanged blows, all kinds of true energy rippled out. They were ready to risk everything for the 10,000 bestial flames. Before seeing the 10,000 bestial flames, their goal was to prevent the Shura sect demons from obtaining it. But now that they saw the 10,000 bestial flames, the greed in their hearts couldn't be suppressed. They attacked each other for their own benefit. The Shura sect overlord, Duan Ling, had obviously anticipated this situation. He merely glanced at the group and sneered. He could feel the pure spiritual energy from the departed soul orb surging into his body, instantly transforming into the Shura true energy in his body. This true chi made him feel that his cultivation was constantly getting stronger. The villa master of the White Cloud Villa, Wu Mu, could clearly feel the increasing pressure. This pressure caused his complexion to become increasingly unsightly. The cloud-rising sword spun in his hand. Every thrust of the sword was accompanied by a loud clamor. Thousands of sword intents swept down from the heavens like a long river. Boom! Two different sword wills collided in the air. Wu Mu's sword will was pure and majestic, while Duan Ling's sword energy was bloody and terrifying. As they collided, Wu Mu's sword intent was pushed back bit by bit. Moreover, as time passed, the speed at which he was forced to retreat became faster and faster. This was because Duan Ling's sword will was getting stronger and stronger. Duan Ling cultivated the Shura sect sword will, a sword will that was cultivated from mountains of corpses and seas of blood. In the past, the Shura sect stirred up a bloodbath in the southern region because Duan Ling cultivated the Shura sect sword will. At that time, Duan Ling was invincible and suppressed the entire southern region. He was the nightmare of all the southern region's forces. Later on, the Celestial Arcanum sect and the other major sects joined forces to suppress and disperse the Shura sect. Now, the Shura sect was making a comeback. This time, Duan Ling's Shura sect sword will was even stronger. His cultivation was also getting stronger. He even wanted to borrow the heaven and earth obsidian flames to break through the shackles of the Supreme Being realm and step into the 10th grade Supreme Being realm. Shura sect demon, don't even think about getting the 10,000 bestial flames. Wu Mu roared with blood dripping from his mouth. Then, thousands of sword intents converged and transformed into a giant sword. This sword light seemed as though it was going to tear through the heavens. Duan Ling's gaze became serious. This Wu Mu was actually burning his blood essence and becoming more and more courageous. Bu Fong held the black turtle constellation wok in his right hand and the dragon bone kitchen knife in his left. He raised his head and looked at the supreme fire dragon, whose body seemed to be burning with flames. This was a supreme beast. A terrifying pressure was faintly discernible on the body of the fire dragon. Bu Fong could sense how terrifying this fire dragon was. Roar! The fire dragon roared and the magma within the fire pit seemed to erupt. Waves of heat rolled over and blew at Bu Fong's hair. The velvet rope tied around Bu Fong's hair was snapped and his hair fluttered in the wind. Bu Fong furrowed his brows and poured his true energy into the black turtle constellation wok. The pitch-black black turtle constellation wok suddenly expanded in size. Moreover, the pitch-black body of the wok shone with a golden luster. The patterns on its surface seemed to have come to life and were incomparably mysterious. The fire dragon opened its mouth, which was filled with ferocious fangs, and let out a roar. Then, it fiercely bit down on Bu Fong. It wanted to swallow the ant in front of it in one bite. Bu Fong raised his palm and the enormous black turtle constellation wok suddenly floated up. Then, Bu Fong gently exhaled and slapped the black turtle constellation wok with his palm. A dull thud resounded. The enormous and resplendent black turtle constellation wok was slapped by Bu Fong and was sent flying toward the fire dragon. The fire dragon opened its mouth and actually spat out a flaming dragon's breath. The temperature of that dragon's breath was extremely scorching and it hit the black turtle constellation wok. Boom! Boom! A streak of purple light flashed past. Xiao Bai's figure suddenly burst out from afar. His eyes turned purple as he stomped his feet on the ground. He raised his chubby head and his whole body was like a cannonball that shot up into the sky. With a swoosh, he appeared in front of the black turtle constellation wok. He raised his fist and smashed it on the black turtle constellation wok. With a buzzing sound, the black turtle constellation wok, which was blocked by the dragon's breath, suddenly rolled forward and ruthlessly hit the head of the fire dragon. The black turtle constellation wok was originally heavy and incomparably sturdy. With such a smash, the supreme fire dragon was a little dumbfounded. The enormous fire dragon staggered a few steps backward and instantly fell into the boiling lava with a plop. Xiao Bai was sucked into the black turtle constellation wok, his purple eyes shining. With a stomp of his leg, Xiao Bai's figure spun 360 degrees in the air, turning into a nimble fatty and landing hard on the ground. After that attack, the black turtle constellation Wak once again became black and swarthy. It returned to Bufang's hand and was caught by Bufang with one hand. With a light bang, the black turtle constellation Wak directly turned into green smoke and dissipated. Swoosh! Within the lava, the roaring figure of the fire dragon darted out. A pair of fleshy wings flapped, rolling up thousands of fire waves. The dragon's eyes surged with murderous intent as it stared at Bufang. Xiao Bai stomped his leg again. The ground cracked under this stomp. His whole body was like a cannonball as he shot out and punched the mouth of the fire dragon, attracting its attention. The two of them were locked in a fierce battle. Bufang looked at the fire dragon and Xiao Bai, who had started to fight. He turned his head and his gaze fell on the golden flame that was quietly burning in the air. Above the flame was a grayish-white bead. Countless spirit essences and remnant souls were circulating in the white bead. Bufang tiptoed, his figure swaying as he floated in the air. After breaking through to 7th grade Battle Saint, he could temporarily hover in the air, which was somewhat convenient. Otherwise, Bufang would have to worry about how to approach the 10,000 bestial flames. Although this was his first time hovering in the air, and although it was crooked and ugly, at least, he safely arrived in front of the 10,000 bestial flames. The temperature around the 10,000 bestial flames was terrifying. As soon as Bufang approached, he felt as if his whole body was burning. The scorching temperature made him frown involuntarily. As a heaven and earth obsidian flame, the 10,000 bestial flames naturally had its extraordinary features. From time to time, the sparks around the raging flames would transform into ferocious-looking spirit beasts that pounced on Bufang. They were like ferocious tigers, lions, lone wolves, and savage dragons. There were all kinds of them, and their savage energy was extremely terrifying. System: how do I collect the 10,000 bestial flames? As Bufang got closer to the heaven and earth obsidian flames, his whole body was drenched in sweat. As his hair fluttered in the wind, some strands of his hair stuck to his face and body. As for how to collect the 10,000 bestial flames, Bufang naturally had no idea, so he asked the system. The 10,000 bestial flames is a heaven and earth obsidian flame, a treasure of heaven and earth formed by the accumulation of the spirit energy of heaven and earth. The system does not provide services for the heaven and earth obsidian flame, but it can provide the host with the method to collect the heaven and earth obsidian flame. The system's solemn and earnest voice rang out. Bufang was dumbfounded. Then, a hazy voice resounded in his mind. The voice was faintly discernible and distant. This was the method the system transmitted to Bufang to collect the heaven and earth obsidian flame. In the distance, the Shura sect overlord Duan Ling was suppressing Wu Mu. All of a sudden, he sensed something. He turned his head and saw a tiny figure hovering beside the heaven and earth obsidian flame. Since when did someone get so close to the heaven and earth obsidian flame? Duan Ling was startled. He carefully sensed the figure and discovered that the cultivation level of the figure was merely that of a 7th grade battle saint. So it's just a small fry that overestimates himself. The heaven and earth obsidian flame is so violent. How would anyone below the level of a supreme being dare to covet it? Just wait to be burned to ashes. Duan Ling laughed disdainfully in his heart. He no longer paid attention to the figure because he knew that once that person greedily tried to collect the heaven and earth obsidian flame, he would be mercilessly burned to death. Not only Duan Ling, but the others also witnessed this scene. Many people were secretly sneering at Bufang for overestimating himself. However, of course, there were exceptions. The supreme being of the clear sky pagoda, Yi Yunqing, widened his eyes. The fat on his face trembled as he stared at the figure hovering beside the 10,000 bestial flames. Isn't this Honorbu? Yi Ziling's face was also filled with a strange expression. Her cherry lips were agape in shock. It really was Honorbu. Shouldn't this guy be running a small shop in the Imperial City? Why would he come to the 100,000 mountains, sneak into a crowd of supreme beings, and appear beside the 10,000 bestial flames? More importantly, was the 10,000 bestial flames something he could touch? Wouldn't Owner Bu be burned to death by the 10,000 bestial flames? Probably, Yi Xiling thought to herself hesitantly. At this moment, Bu Fang didn't care about what the others thought. He slowly opened his eyes. The 10,000 bestial flames, which were glaring and scorching hot, gradually became gentle in his eyes. Chapter 350. The system's voice resounded in Bu Fang's mind, reverberating in the distance. He discovered that true energy was rapidly flowing out of his energy center and coursing through his body. His arms were instantly covered by true energy, as though the veins in his arms were opened up by the true energy. Bu Fang knew that this was the cultivation method the system taught him to subdue the heaven and earth obsidian flames. After all, the heaven and earth obsidian flames were heavenly treasures formed by the accumulation of heaven and earth spirit energy. Without some tricks, how could one subdue them? However, after studying the method provided by the system, he opened his eyes and looked at the 10,000 bestial flames with a gentler gaze. It was especially amiable. If someone saw Bu Fang's gaze at this moment, they would definitely think that he was an idiot. However, only Bu Fang himself knew that he wasn't an idiot. The method provided by the system was simply tailor-made for him. The way to subdue the 10,000 bestial flames is to eat it. Eat it? This bizarre method was the reason why Bu Fang was dumbfounded. However, after the initial shock, Bu Fang finally understood. This was also why he looked at the 10,000 bestial flames with such a gentle gaze. The method provided by the system was indeed the most suitable for Bu Fang. As Bu Fang looked at the 10,000 bestial flames, his pupils slightly dilated, and a hint of excitement appeared in his eyes. He wondered how the 10,000 bestial flames would taste. This was just a ball of fire, so the taste shouldn't be that great. The texture should be even worse. This was the first time he had eaten fire in his life, so he was a little nervous. Bu Fang squinted his eyes and pondered. While he squinted his eyes and pondered, the true energy in his body had completely covered his entire body according to the method provided by the system. Bu Fang's skin seemed to turn red. He slightly opened his mouth and exhaled a breath of hot air. Bu Fang looked at the 10,000 bestial flames with a burning gaze. A loud clanging sound echoed. The blood-colored Shura sect sword will directly crushed the White Cloud Villa Master's sword will. Wu Mu was sent flying, and blood dripped from the corners of his mouth. The battle between the two had already shaved the surrounding trees into pieces. The sharp sword Qi was practically unstoppable. Every time it struck down, it would leave a hole in the ground. The battle between the Grand Elder and the Azura's Gate High Priest had reached its climax. In fact, the battle between the two formation sovereigns was even more exciting. Although it didn't seem obvious on the surface, the risks involved in their battle wasn't something that either of them dared to bear. If they were careless and revealed an opening, the other party would take advantage of that opening and increase the damage. At that time, the formation would be broken and the people would die. Therefore, the battle between formation supreme beings was much more dangerous than the battle between ordinary supreme beings. The High Priestess was wearing a tutu and her voluptuous figure was on full display. Her exquisite face, which was hidden under the mask, was filled with a grave expression. She crossed her fair legs, and blood-red jade talismans floated around her body, forming a mysterious formation. On the other hand, the Tianji sect's Supreme Elder seemed to be much more relaxed. After all, he had been studying arrays for so many years, and his understanding of arrays was much deeper than the High Priest. It was a piece of cake for him to deal with. Duan Yun, who was watching from afar, was already in a daze. His eyes were wide open as he sucked on the roasted meat from the wooden branch. His gray hair fluttered in the violent waves of energy. This kid actually managed to get there, so close to the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Why isn't he burned to death? Duan Yun was truly in disbelief. Perhaps Bufang had always been a little unfathomable to him. Whether it was his mysterious culinary skills, or the fact that he was only a 7th-grade supreme being, he was able to use a black walk to knock him down. All of these baffled him. He had always suspected that Bufang was someone from outside the southern region. After all, the hidden dragon continent was so vast that it was normal for 1 or 2 extraordinary people to appear. Suddenly, Duan Yun became excited. What if this kid really managed to snatch the 10,000 bestial flames? That would be fun. A bunch of supreme beings were fighting over the heaven and earth obsidian flames, but in the end it was snatched away by an ant-like 7th-grade battle saint. Just the thought of it was exhilarating. Yi Xiling, Yi Yunqing, and the others, who were acquainted with Bufang, found it increasingly inconceivable. They would never have imagined that Bufang would appear here. Duan Ling felt that his cultivation was getting stronger and stronger. The spirit energy that shot down from the sky seemed to have materialized into a beam of light. His body hungrily absorbed the spirit energy. He felt as if the shackles on his body were continuously being broken. He felt as if he was about to step into a whole new realm, the 10th-grade divine echelon. The Shura sect came from outside the southern region. He clearly knew how powerful the 10th-grade divine echelon, which was above the 9th-grade supreme being, was. Below the divine echelon, even the 9th-grade supreme being, were all mortals. Their bodies were all shackles that bound them. In front of the divine echelon, even a supreme being was just an ant. Gripping the Shura sect sword, the sword energy that gushed out of his arm became increasingly powerful. With a slash, the majestic true energy seemed to be able to traverse the vast sky. With a single slash, Wu Mu was sent flying, spitting out blood. Wu Mu was also a swordsman who had comprehended the sword will. However, in front of Duan Ling's ever-increasing strength, he became extremely weak. Ha ha! Break for me! My Shura sect will eventually rise again. I, Duan Ling, will eventually return to glory. Duan Ling laughed excitedly. His laughter was filled with a domineering aura that reverberated in the surroundings. On the ground, Bei Gongming, who had been knocked out by Bufang with the Black Turtle Constellation walk, finally sat up, swaying. He felt as if his head was about to be torn apart. His crooked nose bridge hurt him to the bone. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Who did he offend? Bei Gongming felt as if his face was no longer his own. He had failed miserably at such an easy task. As he thought about it, his hatred for Bufang, who was the instigator of all this, intensified. Bei Gongming's mind flickered, and he began to search for Bufang. His gaze shifted and locked onto the figure in the distance. It would have been fine if he didn't look at it, but the moment he did, he was so scared that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. Is that kid crazy? In his eyes, that ant-like 7th-grade battle saint was actually reaching out to grab the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Even a supreme being expert wouldn't dare to have such intimate contact with the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Bufang felt his body heating up, and he couldn't help but furrow his brows. He reached out his hand, revealing his fair and clean fingers. Buzz, as if sensing Bufang's approach, the 10,000 bestial flames suddenly trembled and an invisible wave spread out. The wave seemed to be warning Bufang to stay away. Bufang couldn't even care less about a person's emotions, let alone a ball of flames. In his eyes, the 10,000 bestial flames seemed to have transformed into a steaming hot oyster pancake, filled with an alluring fragrance. Bufang licked his lips, and his palm finally neared the 10,000 bestial flames. A peculiar suction force erupted from his palm, and Bufang's brows twitched. Boom! Whitey fiercely stomped on the ground, and its entire body shot up. It actually floated to Bufang's side. In his eyes, a purple glow shone brightly, and his will to fight intensified. As Bufang grabbed the heaven and earth obsidian flames, he could only feel one thing. It was scorching hot, extremely scorching hot. This ball of flames was really scalding. The true energy within Bufang's body was constantly flowing, and the mysterious route allowed Bufang to hold onto the heaven and earth obsidian flames, making it difficult for the opponent to break free. Fortunately, the 10,000 bestial flames had just taken shape, and its power wasn't that strong. Therefore, Bufang could still control it. If its power was a little stronger, Bufang might really be burned to ashes. This was what Bufang, who was currently absorbing the 10,000 bestial flames, truly felt. What is this? Bufang exhaled lightly, and the breath he exhaled was scalding hot, as if it was about to boil. However, Bufang was very calm. He saw a grayish-white bead hovering above the 10,000 bestial flames. Surging spirit energy and monstrous wails were constantly gushing out from the bead. Reaching out a hand, Bufang grabbed the scalding bead, and directly pulled it down from above the flames. It seems a little familiar. Bufang squinted his eyes. He felt that this bead was somewhat similar to the soul congregation array he had obtained previously. However, Bufang had always scoffed at this kind of thing. After all, it couldn't be eaten. "Xiao Bai, open your stomach," Bufang calmly said to Xiao Bai, who was hovering in the air beside him. Xiao Bai was filled with ferocity as he prepared to slaughter the fire dragon below. When he suddenly heard Bufang's order, the purple glow in his mechanical eyes flickered. Following Bufang's order, Xiao Bai's stomach opened up, and a pitch-black hole emerged. Looking at the gloomy and pitch-black hole, Bufang tossed the grayish-white bead in his hand, then directly threw it into Xiao Bai's stomach. Duan Ling, who was hovering in the air and bathing in the torrential spirit energy, had a look of enjoyment on his face. He felt as if his entire being was ascending. The pure spirit energy was refined from the boundless spirit energy, and his body could naturally absorb it. When he absorbed all the spirit energy in the departed soul orb, he would be able to break the shackles of the Supreme Being realm and step into the 10th grade. When that time came, he would be able to rule the world. He would have the capital to lead the Shura sect to rise again, and once again, slaughter his way back to the continent. He was intoxicated by the feeling of his true energy skyrocketing, and he was addicted to the pleasure of increasing his strength. However, this pleasurable feeling didn't last for long. All of a sudden, it stopped abruptly. The light beam of spirit energy descending from the sky gradually dried up and then disappeared. Duan Ling opened his eyes abruptly, and his mind trembled violently. What happened? Why did the spirit energy descending from the departed soul orb disappear? Who touched my departed soul orb? Who was the one who ruined my chance? His heart was burning with anger. He turned his head to look in the direction of the 10,000 bestial flames, and what he saw made his lungs explode. Chapter 351. It would never have guessed that someone was planning to eat it. You're insane. You even want to eat the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Are you still human? The 10,000 bestial flames initially struggled for a while, but in the end it was as if it had nothing left to live for and was too lazy to even struggle. The sound of metal colliding suddenly burst forth from Xiao Bai's back. Then, a pair of wide metal wings appeared abruptly, emanating a chilling metallic glow. The fire dragon in the pit of fire roared, its dragon breath shooting in all directions. With a flap of its wings, it soared into the sky, aiming directly at Bufang. What grudge did you have against me? Why did you do this to me? Bufang smacked his lips, feeling a strange sensation. Not only did the 7th grade battle saint approach the 10,000 bestial flames easily, he even grabbed it with his bare hands. This was a freaking heaven and earth obsidian flame formed by the condensation of the spirit energy of heaven and earth. Did he finish it just like that? The 5 supreme beings approached with a thunderous roar. The void seemed to tremble, and a terrifying murderous aura blotted out the sky. Bufang seemed to have tasted something different. His eyebrows twitched and he tore at it bit by bit. Just like that, the entire ball of pulsating 10,000 bestial flames was completely devoured by him. Yi Xilin's exquisite face became increasingly strange. She stared at Honorbu's actions, her large eyes blinking incessantly. Duanling was so angry that his hair stood on end. The blood-red sword intent wreaked havoc around his body, completely out of control. The departed soul orb was destroyed, the heaven and earth obsidian flame was stolen, and everything the Shura sect had done was for naught. Just as Bufang was feeling like he was on fire and suffering, the solemn voice of the system rang out. This heaven and earth obsidian flame seemed to have sensed danger. It was constantly pulsating, trying to break free from Bufang's restraint. It was a ball of fire, not an oyster pancake. Even a supreme being wouldn't dare to touch it. How could a mere 7th-grade battle saint be so daring? The flame was golden in color, extremely dazzling. It was as beautiful as a flower that had been watered with gold. However, Bufang was very calm. The supreme pressure had no effect on him at all. He raised his head to take a look. Finally, the formation was completed. He heaved a sigh of relief. It stood in front of Bufang and faced the 5 supreme martial artists who were rushing over. This burp was accompanied by a small golden flame that scuttled out of his mouth. The Tianji sect's supreme elder was smiling as he stroked his white beard. His eyes carried a trace of strange light as he looked at Bufang, seemingly deep in thought. The audience was silent. At this moment, everyone stopped fighting. Everyone's gaze fell on Bufang. Xiao Bai's drunken body finally stopped moving. His eyes, which alternated between red and purple, finally turned gray, the same gray as the departed soul orb. This scene almost made Duanling's lungs explode. He was too angry. He felt that his dignity was being trampled on, and he felt that his face was being slapped. This guy wants to run away. As the ball of fire entered his stomach, Bufang's face was flushed red. He couldn't help burping. Eh? Xiaobai, you can fly? Bufang asked in surprise. A ball of fire suddenly surged and shuttled back and forth in his mouth. Finally, it was rolled up by his tongue and swallowed with a gulp. Bufang's heart suddenly tightened. Could it be that Xiaobai ate something bad? The orb he tossed out earlier, was that poisonous? Originally, everything was going according to his plan. He also felt the pleasure brought by the continuous improvement of his cultivation level. He opened his mouth, bit down, and tore it apart. Those who spoil my plans must be killed. This guy, he deserved to die. Duanling, the Shura sect overlord, was furious. Killing intent boiled in his eyes. Sword energy roared and danced around his body. Ah! The murderous intent in his heart was so thick that it almost burst him. Bufang's eyes widened. He felt white specks of light appear above his head. Those specks of light constantly converged and formed a transportation array that Bufang was very familiar with. Bufang tossed the grayish-white orb into Xiaobai's stomach. He didn't pay any more attention to it. His mind was completely focused on the 10,000 bestial flames. Under everyone's incredulous gazes, he tore off another ball of fire. With a roll of his tongue, the mysterious flame entered his stomach. Why did you have to toss the departed soul orb to the puppet as if it was a piece of trash? With his energy center as the center, the true energy within his body spread to his limbs and bones. An irrepressible burning sensation enveloped his entire body. Looking at the 10,000 bestial flames, Bufang felt his mouth go dry. He couldn't help but stick out his tongue and lick his lip. Buzz, not to mention a 7th-grade battle saint, even an 8th-grade war god would be frightened to the point that his legs would turn to jelly under the pressure of so many supreme beings. He was so angry that he couldn't even control his sword intent. His gray eyes flickered. The texture wasn't good. It was boiling hot and the smell wasn't very strong. There was a faint, burnt smell of barbecued meat. Buzz, it allowed his cultivation to break through the shackles and break free from the shackles of the Supreme Being realm. As soon as he finished speaking, he planned to attack Bufang. However, the Supreme Elder's transportation array moved and enveloped him. Wu Mu also soared into the sky. White sword energy crisscrossed. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered continuously. Red and purple light whistled and intertwined with each other. A gust of wind howled and transformed into a tornado. It enveloped Bufang's body and tried to teleport him away. The Supreme Beings were enraged. 5 Supreme Beings attacked Bufang at the same time. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Xiao Bai floated in the air, his body emitting waves of strange energy. His chubby body swayed randomly in the air, as if he was drunk. The departed soul orb quietly floated above the 10,000 bestial flames. This was Duan Ling's plan. Only after being roasted by the heaven and earth obsidian flames could the tens of thousands of spiritual essences and remnant souls in the departed soul orb be converted into surging spirit energy to nourish his body. Wu Mu also propped himself up with his sword and let out a long howl. I can't defeat you, but I'm delighted to see that you can't obtain the 10,000 bestial flames. In the end, all of his hard work and painstaking efforts were thrown away like garbage, and he was even eaten by a puppet. Whoosh. He had planned this for a long time. He didn't hesitate to start a war in the Light Wind Empire and collected countless spiritual essences and departed souls just to achieve a breakthrough. All the true energy converged on Bufang's face. At this moment, Bufang's face was covered with dense true energy patterns. His eyes were fixed on the dazzling, pulsating 10,000 bestial flames. That was the departed soul orb. The semi-divine artifact departed soul orb. What happened just now? Was that person eating fire? Fire, could it really be eaten? The Shura sect high priestess' fine black hair fluttered in the wind. Her eyes, which were hidden under the mask, were filled with rage. Her chest, which was hidden under the doo-doo, was heaving up and down. This fire is poisonous, Bufang thought to himself. Bufang's brows twitched. He was a little nervous. 5 Supreme Being existences. This lineup was a little scary. The magic array above Bufang's head became more and more obvious. The Supreme Being experts in the distance also came to their senses. Owner Bu isn't planning to eat fire, is he? The one-legged toad made a croaking sound. It stomped its sole leg and soared into the sky. Then, it stomped down on Bufang's position. The Shura sect sword flashed across the sky. Sword energy wreaked havoc. Duan Ling's gaze locked onto Bufang and he pointed his sword at him. What the hell is that puppet? Why is it eating my opportunity? The departed soul orb was eaten by the puppet, and the 10,000 bestial flames was eaten by an ant. The heaven and earth obsidian flames, which was the embodiment of the spirit energy of heaven and earth, was eaten up just like that? The more the crowd watched, the stranger they became. Their expressions became more and more interesting. The way Bufang stretched his face toward the 10,000 bestial flames was simply stimulating their hearts. At this moment, all the Supreme Being experts had their eyes on Bufang. After eating the 10,000 bestial flames, the only thing Bufang felt was heat. His entire body was burning hot, so hot that his eyes turned red. More importantly, it wasn't burned to ashes? Of course, since the departed soul orb was eaten by the puppet, the light beam of spirit energy no longer shot out. This prevented him from continuing his breakthrough. This made him even more furious. Their faces were filled with puzzlement. They couldn't understand Bufang's actions. He cupped the ball of golden flames and slowly lifted it up. His mouth moved closer to it. Bufang furrowed his brows as he felt the 10,000 bestial flames travel down his throat and into his stomach. When the Supreme Elder saw Duan Ling's seething gaze, he felt a burst of joy in his heart. He couldn't help but throw his head back and laugh heartily. His goal was to stop Duan Ling from obtaining the 10,000 bestial flames. This ending couldn't be any better. The fats on Yi Yunqing's body were jiggling. Everyone looked at Bufang as if they were looking at a monster. But soon, they came back to their senses. Their expressions became more and more interesting. The eyes of the two supreme beings from the godly temple of the Wildlands turned bloodshot. Their bodies trembled as they roared and charged toward Bufang. Could it be that the 10,000 bestial flames was fake? The pulsating 10,000 bestial flames also stopped moving at this moment. Duan Ling was originally filled with anger. When he saw this scene, his mouth twitched and his eyes were filled with disbelief. However, when the light beam of spirit energy that descended from the sky dried up and disappeared, Duan Ling's heart thumped. He had a bad feeling about this. Naturally, they could sense the energy of the teleportation array. Congratulations to the host for collecting the 10,000 bestial flames tinder and completing the abrupt mission. Now issuing the abrupt mission reward. Prepare to teleport back. Bufang's eyes widened and he hurriedly covered them. You didn't eat the flames, you ate the heartbeat. They wanted to protect Bufang. The Serpentine Sovereign's beautiful face was incomparably cold. She swayed her green serpent tail and dashed toward Bufang. Thus, he turned his head and saw a skinny figure easily plucking the departed soul orb from the top of the 10,000 bestial flames. Damn it! They were fighting for the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Now that the thing they were fighting for had been eaten by someone else, what was the point of fighting for it? In this world, there was actually such an eccentric fire-eater? Bei Gongming was dumbfounded. His heart was filled with astonishment. Under the gazes of the crowd, Bufang's face finally came into contact with the 10,000 bestial flames. He exhaled a mouthful of scorching hot air that was on the verge of boiling. His eyes were blazing. Beside Bufang, Xiao Bai's figure floated up. Chapter 352. Trying to run away after acting tough? Did he really think all the supreme beings here were pushovers? He wanted to forcefully break the supreme being's shackles and ascend to the 10th grade divine realm. The Supreme Elder clutched his chest, gasping for air. His gray eyes flashed, cold and merciless. Xiao Bai flapped his wings and appeared under the toad's leg. Bufang was shocked. This damn toad was so vicious. Bang! Bang! Moreover, they were very interested in how Bufang could swallow the 10,000 bestial flames. Because the 10th grade divine realm required one to break the shackles of heaven and earth. It was to fight against heaven and earth. This giant toad wanted to flatten Bufang with one leg. The wind swept, and Bufang's vision was finally blurred. After spreading his wings, Xiao Bai seemed to be more energetic. White Yi's fist smashed into the fire dragon's head, and it actually broke open the other party's head. Although Xiao Bai's fighting capacity was not bad, he could barely fight against a supreme being. This lunatic. How could it be that easy to break through to the 10th grade divine realm? He's seeking his own death. Duan Ling was constantly gathering true energy, trying to break the shackles. These were the supreme being's shackles. Although they were gone, they still imperceptibly bound Duan Ling. In the end, he couldn't break free and step into the 10th grade. The Supreme Elder's face turned ashen. He staggered several steps in the air, clutching his chest as his breathing heaved. Xiao Bai's hands wrapped around the toad's leg. The giant one-legged toad felt a tremendous force coming from its leg. How could such a being appear in the training ground? What the F***ck are we going to train for? He couldn't wait any longer. He began to forcefully break through the realm. He had a feeling that Xiao Bai's transformation was related to the departed soul orb he had just given to Xiao Bai to eat. It seemed like he had eaten something bad. The ground was smashed. Broken rocks flew everywhere, but Xiao Bai's figure was nowhere to be seen. He let out a long howl that carried a hint of pain and struggle. They all stared at Bufang, their eyes filled with greed and excitement. Many people around sucked in a breath of cold air. Then, a gigantic toad leg that blotted out the sun descended from the sky. After all, he hasn't broken through the shackles of the Supreme Being realm and can only be considered half a step into the divine realm. It's a pity that the little guy is being targeted. I hope he can escape from the demon's pursuit and survive. After all, he has devoured the 10,000 bestial flames and has a bright future ahead of him. Was this the higher realm above the supremacy stage? With a loud explosion, the chain on Duan Ling's arm shattered in half. He was holding a cold chain in his hand. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face was deathly pale. However, Duan Ling's opportunity had been interrupted by Bufang. He still had to force his way through. Once he failed, he would be reduced to ashes. What the hell? Was this really a trial ground? There was actually someone who wanted to force his way through. He wanted to break through the shackles of the Supreme Being realm and ascend to the 10th grade divine realm. The flying knife that was smashed away wobbled as it flew back to Xiao Bai's pair of wings. It became energetic again and dashed forward. He raised his fist, his gray eyes flickering as he punched down. The one-legged toad was enraged. It opened its mouth, and a monstrous wave came crashing down. A blood-red sword streaked across the sky, slashing toward Bufang as if it was going to slash through everything. Xiao Bai's machete was smashed into pieces by the Shura's sword, turning into thousands of flying knives that scattered in all directions. However, the axe was only halfway through its flight when it was smashed away by several flying knives that soared into the sky, causing it to deviate from its course. A round mechanical puppet with a pair of metal wings on its back flapped its wings. Xiao Bai streaked across the sky and stood in front of the fire dragon. If all the spirit energy in the departed soul orb had been absorbed by Duan Ling, the Supreme Elder wouldn't have dared to make such a claim. As long as he could capture this ant, he might have a chance to obtain the 10,000 bestial flames. The fire dragon, which had just risen up, was smashed back into the magma by Xiao Bai's punch. He actually pulled on the chain and dashed toward Bufang. Bufang's face was burning and his ears were flushed. However, his eyes were filled with astonishment. He looked at Xiao Bai, who had spread his wings, and he was a little dumbfounded. Xiao Bai had grown wings? Was he going to turn into the flying Xiao Bai? A giant axe appeared in his hands. This was the semi-divine weapon of the godly temple of the Wildlands, the profound heavy axe. It weighed more than 1,000 pounds, and it was indestructible. Its power was extremely formidable. Whitey abruptly slammed its fists together, emitting a clanging sound. The metal wings on its back flapped and spread out ferociously. The range of the wings suddenly expanded, turning into a dense cluster of flying daggers that connected with each other. He knew that the teleportation had begun, and he was about to leave. Holding the Shura sect sword, Duan Ling raised his head and narrowed his eyes. Yi Yunqing trembled as he stroked his beard. Yi Xiling didn't understand what this meant, but as a supreme being, how could he not understand? Boom! The gale under the teleportation formation grew more and more violent. Bufang had already begun to feel a suction force, and the scene in front of him was about to become blurry. Bufang's vision was constantly obscured by the gale, and the images he could see became less and less. Xiao Bai's gray eyes flickered, and the wings on his back spread out once again. Numerous flying knives swept up, turning into a giant machete that collided with the Shura sect sword. The muscles on his face twitched, and there was a raging fire burning in his heart. Damn it! How dare you ruin my plans? Kill! The gale howled, constantly spreading around Bufang's body, and his hair fluttered in the wind. Xiao Bai is indeed powerful. Crazy clothes stripping demon, skin this one-legged toad. Trying to teleport away? Dream on. Above the vault of heaven, there was a roar. Escape? Even if you run to the ends of the earth, I, Shura Duan Ling, will tear you into 1,000 pieces. You stole my opportunity and forced me to break through. This enmity will not end until one of us is dead. The two supreme beings from the godly temple of the Wildlands also activated their true energy, blasting out waves of true energy. They looked incredulously at Duan Ling, who was standing proudly in the void, with wisps of black energy surging around him. He couldn't let Bufang escape so easily. Therefore, he had to destroy the teleportation array above Bufang's head. The attacks from both sides collided in the void, producing a constant roar. Flying knives were constantly knocked away, but the combined attack of the 5 supreme beings was constantly being weakened. In the vault of heaven, a frog croaked. The teleportation formation that had been trapping the Shura sect overlord Duan Ling was directly shattered. A terrifying pressure of heaven and earth came crashing down. Boom! The last thing Huang Xiaolong saw was the Azura's Gate Sovereign's murderous gaze. Duan Ling, who had been bound by the chains, roared. His hair stood on end and his eyes were bloodshot. Swoosh! Swoosh! The flying knives converged on Xiao Bai's back, forming a pair of wings. The combined attack of the 5 supreme beings was unexpectedly broken by Xiao Bai. The Grand Elder heaved a sigh of relief, his face a mixture of joy and worry. With a wave of his fists, the wings on Xiao Bai's back soared up into the sky. Flying knives whistled through the air, colliding with the attacks of the 5 supreme beings. The axe spun rapidly in the void, making a swooshing sound as it smashed toward Bufang. Within his body, the surging true energy was attacking the shackles in his body, and terrifying fluctuations lingered. The warrior from the godly temple of the Wildlands was enraged. He let out a long roar, and the muscles on his body glowed. With a twist of his arm, the flying knife flew back to his hand. His gray eyes turned and locked on the godly temple's supreme being warrior. Roar! The 5 supreme beings in the distance dashed toward him. Their auras were extremely terrifying. Duan Ling's face was filled with ruthlessness. He pulled up the ice-cold chain and slowly tied it around his left arm. After binding it, the chain gradually became transparent and disappeared. A surging sword intent descended from the sky. With a croak, he felt himself being thrown away. Duan Ling's body emitted a boundless pressure. Everyone was dumbfounded because they discovered that there was actually a rustling ice-cold shackle that appeared on Duan Ling's body. The shackle wrapped around his left arm as if it was connected to the heavens, bringing with it an unparalleled majesty and pressure. The warrior from the godly temple of the Wildlands had a muscular body. He stared at the magic array above Bufang's head and sneered. True energy filled the air. Then, with a sudden burst of strength, the Supreme Being expert tossed out his axe. Bei Gongming, who was below, was so frightened that he fell on his butt. 5 terrifying attacks were directed at Xiao Bai. Blood splattered everywhere. The lava-like blood spurted out of the fire dragon's body with a sizzling sound. From within the pit of fire, a sonorous dragon roar resounded. A scorching dragon's breath gushed out and headed toward Xiao Bai. This was the might of heaven and earth. Bufang narrowed his eyes as he looked at this scene. The ice-cold chains that contained a frightening pressure caused him to feel a little frightened. All of a sudden, his eyes focused. He had to stop this crazy Shura sect overlord. However, at this moment, Xiao Bai seemed to have taken some kind of medicine. He suddenly became so ferocious. He was even more ferocious than a supreme being. Rumble! The 10,000 bestial flames was eaten by this puny ant. However, how could this 7th-grade battle saint refine the heaven and earth obsidian flames in such a short period of time? Perhaps the heaven and earth obsidian flames were still inside this ant's body. Wu Mu spat out another mouthful of blood. The scarlet blood stained the front of his shirt. From their point of view, even though this ant's cultivation level wasn't high, he was full of secrets. These secrets, they were very curious. Xiao Bai's gray eyes were incomparably cold. The pair of steel wings on his back stretched across the vast sky, emitting a terrifying metallic luster. Xiao Bai possessed boundless strength. His body seemed so tiny in front of the one-legged toad. However, he was still able to lift this gigantic supreme being beast and send it flying. He stretched out his hands. Instantly, numerous cracks appeared on his hands. Steel chains shot out from within and hooked onto the leg of the one-legged toad. After the one-legged toad was flung away, the remaining 3 supreme beings rushed over. Yi Ziling's eyes lit up. She was so excited that she was about to jump for joy. The Serpentine Sovereign had a slender waist. She opened her beautiful red lips and spat out a sharp longsword. As the sword gleamed, cold light shone in all directions. The sword slashed at Xiao Bai's body. Xiao Bai was sent flying and crashed heavily into the ground. With a swoosh, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. With a dragon's roar, the fire dragon flapped its wings in the fire pit. It opened its huge mouth full of fangs and bit at Bufang. Anyone who tried to steal the heaven and earth obsidian flames must die. Chapter 353. Within the gigantic pit of fire, the sound of raging flames resounded incessantly. Waves of fire towered to the sky. Although they were ferocious, everyone could sense that these waves of fire had lost their spirit. Without the heaven and earth obsidian flames, the flames within the pit of fire lost their spirit and turned into ordinary flames. And this fire was no longer the focus of their attention. The ground was riddled with craters, broken rocks, and cracks were everywhere. A human-shaped hole had appeared in the ground, but the puppet that was struck down by the Azura's Gate overlord from the sky was nowhere to be seen. Everyone took a deep breath, then exhaled, spitting out the shock in their hearts. They were truly astounded. Whether it was Bufang eating fire or the iron lump puppet that fought against 5 people, they had all witnessed something they had never seen before. And the expressions on their faces were fascinating. The 10,000 bestial flames, which so many supreme beings were fighting for, was stolen by a 7th-grade battle saint and completely eaten. These supreme beings felt as if they had been slapped in the face. Yi Ziling was extremely excited, her tiny fists clenched tightly. Owner Bu was indeed formidable. No, Owner Bu was becoming more and more formidable. Yi Ziling recalled the first time she met Owner Bu. At that time, Owner Bu was still very weak. Xiao Bai was also formidable, adorable, and powerful. She couldn't wait to rush to the imperial city of the Light Wind Empire to meet Owner Bu. She had the urge to meet her idol. Yi Ziling tilted her head and thought for a moment. Then, she narrowed her eyes. Should she tell Sister and I Yin about what happened here? Yi Yunqing was so frightened that all the fat on his body was trembling. With trembling hands, he took out a dragon liver popsicle from his spatial ring and fiercely took a bite. This is too terrifying. That kid doesn't even let fire go. Is there anything on this continent that he can't eat? Compared to the fire-eating Owner Bu, it was better for him to eat a dragon liver popsicle to calm his nerve. Duan Yun watched from afar as Bufang tore apart the 10,000 bestial flames and swallowed it with his own eyes. Suddenly, his entire body trembled. He thought of many things. He thought of the scene where Bufang knocked him out with the black wok and forced him to roast sweet potatoes with Dan fire. Fortunately, he had agreed. If he hadn't, wouldn't that fellow have eaten his alchemic fire? What a monster! Thinking to this point, he suddenly couldn't help but laugh. He looked at the supreme existences in the sky who were angry and embarrassed, and he felt a little carefree. A large group of supreme beings were fooled by a 7th-grade battle saint. Interesting. Wu Mu leaned on the cloud-rising sword and laughed heartily. Even though he coughed up blood from time to time, he felt extremely carefree. He knew that if the 10,000 bestial flames were to fall into the hands of the Shura sect demons, the consequences would be dire. This was the best outcome he could hope for, especially the failure of the Shura sect sovereign to break through the Supreme Being's shackles. This was what excited him the most. Duan Ling hovered in the air, tightly grasping the blood-colored Shura sect sword. His complexion was extremely unsightly, as if he had been smeared with charcoal. He clenched his fists so tightly that his veins were exposed. Wu Mu's loud laughter echoed in his ears. It was like a blatant mockery, and it incited the flames of anger in his chest. He raised his head and felt the hot wind blowing against his face. His ice-cold eyes swept across the crowd and landed on Wu Mu. "Are you laughing at me? I haven't settled the score with you for obstructing me," Duan Ling coldly said. Then, he raised the Shura sect sword and tapped the air with the tip of his foot. The air rippled. Duan Ling's speed was extremely fast, and he charged toward Wu Mu with a sweeping killing intent. His killing intent was truly overflowing. If it weren't for this fellow obstructing him, how could he have allowed the 10,000 bestial flames to be eaten by an ant-like existence? This was all because of Wu Mu. Kill. Buzz. A peculiar pressure emerged from Duan Ling's body. This pressure caused Wu Mu's eyes to widen, and he felt as if his chest was being crushed by a huge rock. The pressure of heaven and earth. A 10th grade divine expert could control the power of heaven and earth to form a pressure of heaven and earth. This was the difference between a supreme being and a divine expert. Even though Duan Ling had failed in his breakthrough, he was still half a step into the divine realm. This level of cultivation was enough to crush Wu Mu. In the face of the pressure of heaven and earth formed by the power of heaven and earth, Wu Mu felt as if his limbs were so heavy that he couldn't even lift them. Was he going to die? Numerous jade talismans fell from the sky and shielded his body. These jade talismans transformed into a magic array and wrapped around Wu Mu, helping him block Duan Ling's sword. As Wu Mu advanced, the formation formed by the jade talismans continuously exploded, emitting a series of explosive sounds. The Celestial Arcanum sect's Supreme Elder wore a grave expression. His wrinkled face trembled slightly. When the last magic array was destroyed by Duan Ling's sword, the Supreme Elder's complexion turned pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Wu Mu's breathing was chaotic. He was already severely injured and couldn't withstand this sword. It seemed like he was really going to die here. All of a sudden, a snake-like cry came from his side. Then, a curved long sword appeared in front of him, blocking his path. With a clang, it was sent flying by the Shura sect sword and shattered into pieces. The Serpentine Sovereign's serpent tail tumbled and her body was sent flying. Her beautiful and delicate face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Wu Mu was dumbfounded. He looked at the Serpentine Sovereign with a complicated expression. When he saw the Shura sect sword shatter the snake-shaped longsword into pieces, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. After Duan Ling was obstructed, the pressure of heaven and earth dissipated. After all, he hadn't completely broken through the Supreme Being's shackles and was severely injured. He only had the power to launch a single sword attack. Unfortunately, it was blocked. His eyes were still as cold as ever. As he swept his gaze across the audience, everyone's heart palpitated. Blood-colored jade talismans floated in the air. Her sparkling and translucent feet stepped on these jade talismans and rose into the air. The High Priestess appeared beside Duan Ling. Her eyes, which were hidden under the mask, were emotionless. The jade talismans swirled and covered both of their bodies. Then, with a gust of wind and a flash of light, the talisman array that covered both of their bodies flew far away from the fiery pit. The Shura sect overlord had escaped. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Bei Gongming sat on the ground. His whole body was trembling. Only now did he have the leisure to turn his head and look at his surroundings. His pupils constricted when he saw it because many disciples had died in this battle. This was an extremely tragic battle. Even though none of the Supreme Beings had fallen, Every single one of them was severely injured. Many 8th grade war gods had fallen as well. Bei Gongming, who was feeling sorrowful, suddenly froze. The 10,000 bestial flames. The 10,000 bestial flames. That guy probably used some secret technique to subdue it. If I inform the sect, even if I can't obtain the 10,000 bestial flames, I still have a chance to obtain a reward. The appearance of a half-step divine warrior in the training ground made Bei Gongming give up on the idea of snatching the 10,000 bestial flames. Even if it was just a half-step divine warrior, he was still not someone he could deal with. As a disciple of the Grand Baron sect, he clearly knew how terrifying a divine warrior could be. The imperial city of the Light Wind Empire. The sky was shrouded in darkness. The bright moon hung high in the sky. In front of the store, rays of light suddenly appeared, followed by a fierce gust of wind. Blackie, who was sleeping soundly by the door, was suddenly awakened by the gust of wind. It lazily opened its doggy eyes and gazed at the magic array that was gradually emerging. Its doggy mouth twitched. The magic array was quickly formed. A tornado whizzed by and a figure descended from the magic array. With a bang, the figure landed on his butt in front of Blackie. Bufang sat on the ground, but he couldn't feel any pain. The only sensation he felt was a scorching heat. Even though he had the cultivation technique provided by the system, he still felt like he was on fire. It was as if his stomach was about to be burned to ashes. His vision was blurry and misty. He scanned his surroundings and realized that he wasn't in his own room. It seemed like the system had accidentally teleported him to the wrong location. Bufang tried to stand up, but his legs felt weak and he sat on the ground again. Blackie looked at Ownerbu, who looked like he was drunk, and immediately rolled its eyes. Where did this kid go to have fun and come back? He actually ran to the Lord Go and acted like a drunkard? Bufang's face turned red and his eyes suddenly widened. He turned his head and glared at the plump dog. Blackie's nose twitched. What was this kid trying to do? Gulp. Bufang felt his stomach churn. He finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He puffed up his mouth, widened his eyes, and spat in the direction of the plump dog. Bang! Blackie didn't expect Bufang to dare to spit at him. He actually dared to spit at the Lord Go? Moreover, the thing he spat out was actually fire? You brat, after having fun, you came back to perform acrobatics? This flame. Wait, damn it. It's the heaven and earth obsidian flame. The Lord Go let out an exasperated bark and immediately jumped up from the ground. His lazy figure jumped up and down to extinguish the flame that enveloped the dog's head. The heaven and earth obsidian flame was a flame formed by gathering the energy of heaven and earth. It almost burnt the Lord Go's gorgeous dog fur black. After spitting out a mouthful of flame, Bufang felt much better. Exhaling, Bufang stood up. Bufang rubbed Blackie's head and patted his stomach. He walked back into the store with a constipated expression. The black puppy was speechless. Looking at the swaying Bufang, it thought for a moment, then snorted and continued lying on the ground. However, just as it lay down, a loud thud resounded. A lump of iron fell from the sky, creating a big hole in the ground in front of it. Rubble flew everywhere. Xiaobai rubbed its round head and stood up from the deep hole. Its mechanical eyes flashed with red, purple, and gray light. Standing up, it felt dizzy. Blackie shook its body to shake off the rubble on its body. It bared its doggy teeth and was so angry. Can't you let this dog sleep well? Chapter 354. Bufang swayed as he returned to the store. Xiaobai followed behind him, who was swaying as well. Bufang felt as though there was a giant whirlpool spinning in his head. It made him dizzy, and he couldn't even walk properly. Bufang hadn't experienced such a feeling for a long time. The last time he experienced such a feeling was when he had a fever in his previous life. Passing through the store, Bufang went up the stairs and returned to his room. Back in his room, Bufang swayed as he walked a few steps. Then, he lay on his bed and fell asleep. The three colors in Xiao Bai's eyes were constantly changing. Finally, he stepped into the kitchen and quietly stayed in a corner. However, there seemed to be some subtle changes happening in his body. Blackie let out a snort as the fats on its body gently trembled, shaking off the crushed rocks on its body. Once again, it became black and plump. Blackie opened its mouth and yawned. Then, it once again fell back into a deep sleep. The 100,000 mountains continued to rumble. A loud sound accompanied by the croaking of a frog could be heard. A giant one-legged toad jumped out of the 100,000 mountains and landed on the plain. Immediately, the ground shook violently. The one-legged toad rolled its eyes. The experts from the godly temple of the Wildlands were standing on top of its head. The experts from the godly temple of the Wildlands had unwilling expressions on their faces. They looked in the direction of the Light Wind Empire. They didn't know who Bufang was. However, they had heard rumors about Bufang. He was a chef who owned a mysterious and powerful puppet. Such a chef could only be the black-hearted owner of the Light Wind Empire's imperial capital. However, no matter what kind of owner he was, he had to be prepared to be hunted down by the Supreme Beings since he dared to snatch the heaven and earth obsidian flames from a group of Supreme Beings. Rumor had it that there was a powerful Supreme Beast in the store that killed that Shura sect venerable. It just so happened that the Shura sect's sovereign was even angrier this time. The anger of a half-step divine expert wasn't something an ordinary person could withstand. They could fish in troubled waters. Roar. A dragon roar resounded as heat waves surged out from the 100,000 mountains. A huge scarlet fire dragon spread its meaty wings and flapped them as it flew out rapidly. This supreme fire dragon spewed out flames from its mouth from time to time, and its lantern-like eyes were filled with rage. The thing that it had guarded for so long had been snatched away by someone else. Naturally, it wouldn't be happy about it. Since it wasn't happy, it would kill its way out of the 100,000 mountains. That was what it was guarding, that was its opportunity. Those who snatched the dragon's fortuitous encounter would not rest until they were dead. Roar! There was another roar and dense flames gushed out of the fire dragon's mouth. With a flap of its fleshy wings, it whizzed across the sky above the western mystery city. One figure after another walked out from the 100,000 mountains. Their auras were incomparably tyrannical. Yi Yunqing rode on the back of the ardent sun bird and hurried on his way. This time, he was obviously going to the Light Wind Imperial City. The corners of his mouth twitched because he knew that the Light Wind Imperial capital, which had just been stabilized, was going to suffer again. Yi Yunqing suddenly sympathized with the Emperor of the Light Wind Empire. This emperor's life was full of misfortunes. Yi Xiling didn't go to the Light Wind Imperial capital. Instead, she passed by the Western Mystery City and entered it. Ai Yen was overseeing the city, and it just so happened that Yi Xiling had a secret to share with her. A sword light streaked across the sky. Wu Mu swallowed several elixirs and his injuries were slightly healed. He was finally able to ride his sword and fly back. Beside him was the Serpentine Sovereign. Her voluptuous figure and beautiful face were as cold as ice. Wu Mu, I have already found my successor. When I return, I will leave the Grand Serpentine City and prepare to leave the southern region. I will head to an even vaster continent to search for an opportunity to break through. The Serpentine Sovereign's tender red lips parted slightly. She didn't even look at Wu Mu as she spoke calmly. Wu Mu was taken aback. When he was about to say something, he was interrupted by the Serpentine Sovereign. We probably won't have the chance to meet again in the future. Let's not meet again, the Serpentine Sovereign said coldly. Then, her figure sped up and she quickly scuttled away, quickly disappearing. Wu Mu's face was filled with embarrassment. He looked at the disappearing figure of the Serpentine Sovereign and sighed with a complicated gaze. A lonely figure was slowly walking across the vast and boundless northwest plains. Duan Yun grabbed a spirit beast leg that had been roasted by alchemic fire and tore at it. As he tore at it, he slowly walked into the distance at an unhurried pace. Oh, the taste of meat roasted by this alchemic fire is really good. Should I change my occupation in the future and become a chef? I might have a bright future. Why don't I become an alchemist? Duan Yun laughed at himself. A light flickered in his eyes as he continued walking forward. A figure appeared in his mind. That unrestrained and unrestrained figure that tore at the heaven and earth obsidian flames. Duan Yun's body slightly trembled as he thought about it. Chefs nowadays were really terrifying. Western Mystery City. A white-haired and white-browed old man slowly walked into the city lord's mansion. An Yen listened to Yi Ziling's vivid description. Her beautiful eyes widened and her small mouth opened slightly. Her face was filled with disbelief. You said that owner Bu has already lost his mind and started eating fire? Can fire really be eaten? Big sister Yen, you didn't see it. Owner Bu tore at the heaven and earth obsidian flames like he was eating roasted meat. The main point is Xiaobai, okay? Xiaobai is really amazing. He fought against 5 people by himself. Yi Ziling's eyes lit up as she excitedly said to Yen. Compared to Bu Fong eating fire, this girl was more concerned about Xiaobai's handsomeness when he fought against 5 people. Those were 5 supreme being existences. They weren't some random trash. Any one of those existences could shake the entire Light Wind Empire. Yen rubbed her smooth chin and smacked her lip. Owner Bu actually went to the 100,000 mountains to fight for fire, and even swallowed the heaven and earth obsidian flames into his stomach. What was he trying to do? Soon Yen's eyes lit up. Who was Owner Bu? It was a chef. What did a chef need fire for? Of course it was to cook. Could it be that Owner Bu came up with a new dish that required the use of the heaven and earth obsidian flames? Yen thought about Bu Fong's culinary skills and the fragrance of the dishes. She couldn't help but lick her red lips with her bright tongue. She was so excited and wanted to eat it. Yi Ziling speechlessly held her forehead. When she saw Yen's expression, she knew that this woman couldn't help but want to eat again. Yen was indeed the Celestial Arcanum sex big foodie. She could compete with her unreliable grandfather. Just when the two of them were chatting excitedly, Yen's crystal-clear ears suddenly twitched and she furrowed her brows. She actually received a message from the Supreme Elder. The Supreme Elder was actually in the Western Mystery City. Yen didn't dare to delay and brought Yi Ziling to look for the Supreme Elder. In the middle of the night, the Western Mystery City's gate opened and 3 figures galloped out of the city, heading straight for the Imperial City. The Imperial City of the Light Wind Empire, at this moment, became the focus of the southern region after the army attacked the city. If Ji Qingshuan knew about this, he wouldn't know whether he should cry or not. The first ray of the morning sun shone through the window and into the small room, dispelling the chill that had enveloped the room for an entire night. The motionless figure lying on the bed suddenly trembled. Bu Fong slowly opened his eyes. He was finally alive. His hair was a little messy and his eyes were a little misty. Rubbing his slightly swollen temples, Bu Fong sat up straight and let out a long breath. His mouth was dry and his throat was a little sore and itchy. Getting up from the bed, Bu Fong walked into the bathroom while rubbing his head. After taking a hot shower to sober himself up, Bu Fong walked out with his hair dripping wet. Bu Fong stretched his body a little, and he seemed to hear the sound of his bones colliding with each other. Slightly raising his eyebrows, Bu Fong clenched his fists and realized that his body was much stronger than before. It seemed that eating the heaven and earth obsidian flame had the health benefits of strengthening the body. Thinking of the heaven and earth obsidian flame, Bu Fong's mind suddenly moved. He sank into his body and began to check the whereabouts of the flame he ate. Whether or not it was subdued by him would determine whether or not he could use the Black Turtle constellation walk to cook. Just as he was about to check, the solemn and serious voice of the system rang in his mind. Chapter 355. Bufang, who refused to believe it, began to try to control it. He tried all kinds of methods, but the ball of arrogant flame remained in his dantian. This is sweet and sour dragon ribs. The Lord Go's favorite. Woof. With a faint smile, Bufang walked back into the store, pulled a chair, and curled up in front of the store. He watched as the Lord Go gobbled up the food, smelled the aroma of the dishes in the air, and basked in the warm sunlight. Life was infinitely better. After stirring the starch juice, Bufang smeared a layer of starch on the earth dragon ribs, which had been cut into pieces. Bufang was ready to start the main event. Bufang clicked his tongue in wonder, and his heart was filled with delight as he admired this beautiful ball of flame. Bufang stuffed the ribs into his mouth, and couldn't help but squint his eyes. Before this, he had always used this wok to smash people, and Bufang was a little embarrassed to do so. With his current cultivation of a 7th-grade battle saint, it was easy for him to use inner sight. Even so, there was a layer of medium between them, so there was still a difference when it came to controlling the ribs. Once the ribs entered the wok, the spirit energy gushing out became turbulent, and was about to rush out of the wok. The system's voice was still solemn and earnest, but Bufang's eyebrows twitched, and he was quite excited. Bufang skillfully scooped out the pieces of meat. The steaming pieces of meat hovered above the kitchen, accompanied by a rich aroma that seemed to be on the verge of materializing. It stuck out its tongue, twitched its nose, and let out an intoxicated barking. Bufang didn't know that if the Supreme Beings heard his thoughts, he would most likely be beaten to death with a gunny sack. The Lord Go snorted inwardly, and then began to gobble down the food from the porcelain bowl. He poured the oil into the black turtle constellation wok, and with a thought, he increased the heat. The temperature of the oil in the wok rose rapidly. Congratulations to the host for subduing the heaven and earth obsidian flame, the 10,000 bestial flame. The 10,000 bestial flame is a heaven and earth obsidian flame born from the accumulation of the spirit chi of heaven and earth. Its power is boundless, and it can incinerate anything. Now that the host has devoured the 10,000 bestial flame, you need to focus on refining it to reach the realm where you can control it freely. Black's originally hazy eyes widened the moment it smelled the aroma of the sweet and sour dragon ribs. After just one round, Bufang's face turned red. Bufang put the earth dragon ribs wrapped in starch into it. The orange-red juice stained the meat, and as Bufang picked it up, it actually pulled out a sticky thread. Chi. When the door was opened, the rich aroma of steaming hot sweet and sour dragon ribs wafted out. With a flick of the knife, he cut open the ribs and flesh of the rank 8 earth dragon. Then, he patted it with the kitchen knife, making the dragon meat more loose and improving the taste. Boom! Once the flame appeared, the temperature in the kitchen instantly rose. It was extremely terrifying. The alley around the store had been rebuilt. After Bufang looked around, he placed the sweet and sour dragon ribs in front of Blackie, who was snoring loudly. Bufang's mouth twitched and his eyes rolled. Then, he took out a big wok. This wasn't the black turtle constellation wok, so he decided to try it with another wok. This rank 8 sweet and sour dragon ribs was the first dish cooked with the black turtle constellation wok, and this fat dog actually benefited from it. In his eyes there was only sweet and sour dragon ribs. Bufang shut his mouth and coughed a few times. He had just learned how to breathe fire, so he was still not used to it. Opening his eyes, Bufang rubbed his chin. The god of cooking set paired with the heaven and earth obsidian flame was indeed extraordinary. Bufang was stunned for a moment and he frowned. He didn't think too much about it, and his mind tried to control the proud flame while practicing his knife and carving skills. From afar, Xiao Xiaolong slowly walked over. His complexion wasn't good, and there was a hint of sorrow in his eyes. He spat out a mouthful of heaven and earth obsidian flame, and it actually went under the black turtle constellation wak. Even though Bufang didn't really care about it, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up into a smile. He was still a little happy, because with the 10,000 bestial flames, he would be able to activate the heaven and earth metamorphosis wak. Bufang's whole body turned red. He opened his mouth, and golden flames were spat out toward the bottom of the big wok. Bufang's heart was filled with delight. His cooking skills had obviously improved again. The flames quietly burned at the bottom of the wok. The black turtle constellation wok floated in the air, and the golden flames were quietly burning, not making any sound. He widened his eyes, and his face was filled with a strange expression. Steam billowed out, rolling up. Green smoke curled up from his right hand, and the pitch-black, unadorned black turtle constellation wok floated above his palm. Bufang calmed his mind once more, and he activated his inner vision. Only Bufang, who had the special technique provided by the system, could shamelessly swallow the 10,000 bestial flames. Then, with a thought, he tried to control the 10,000 bestial flames residing in his dantian. And this plate of sweet and sour dragon meat ribs was the first dish cooked by the black turtle constellation wok. The taste was so good that Bufang couldn't believe it. At this moment, his mouth was still lingering with the dragon meat's fragrance. The soft and tender dragon meat, the fragrant sweet and sour sauce, and the abundant spirit energy complemented each other, forming the exquisite sweet and sour dragon meat ribs. In just an instant, a rich aroma wafted out from the wok. Green smoke curled up from his hand, and the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. The 10,000 bestial flames looked so awesome, but it turned out to be nothing more than this. Bufang was startled, and he hurriedly covered his mouth. While chewing, he carried the cooked sweet and sour ribs out of the kitchen. Bufang's face stiffened. He actually couldn't control the 10,000 bestial flames? Bufang continued to cook unhurriedly. Even Supreme Being experts wouldn't dare to approach it, let alone subdue it. After the first piece of sweet and sour ribs entered his mouth, the Lord Go's widened eyes widened even more. His eyes sparkled with a light that even he couldn't believe. As he practiced, Bufang's heart suddenly moved. He recalled the technique provided by the system to subdue the heaven and earth obsidian flames yesterday. Bufang exhaled, patted his cheeks, then turned around and walked down the stairs. Xiao Xiaolong wasn't here. Why wasn't he here at this hour? At this moment, the temperature within his body was extremely scorching. The true energy flowing within his dantian was like a flame. Moreover, the pale white true energy from before seemed to have been dyed, turning into a resplendent golden color. This made Bufang's heart shudder. Then, an unconcealable excitement and hope appeared in his eyes. The energy vortex in his dantian was slowly rotating, and in the center of the vortex floated a throbbing golden flame. In just a short while, the wok turned red, and with a sizzling sound, a hole was burned through it. Under the black turtle constellation wok, there were 4 small feet that looked like they were made of bronze. When the flames surged into them, the patterns on the 4 small feet began to shine brightly. It was as if there was an invisible wave that was controlling the flames that were gushing out. Compared to the spirit pork, the earth dragon meat was even more delicious. After all, it was an 8th-grade ingredient. Smacking his lips, Bufang used his chopsticks to pick up a piece of sweet and sour ribs. Moreover, with the help of the black turtle constellation wok, the meat in the wok was cooked in no time. With a thought, the obsidian flames surged. What was going on? Why did the flame come out from his mouth? With a swoosh, Blackie pulled the porcelain plate into its bosom, its dog eyes emitting a brilliant radiance. Bufang was startled. Did such a high-temperature flame really come out from his mouth? Looking at Bufang, who was curled up in front of the store, he was taken aback. Could it be that the black turtle constellation wok was destined to be used as a brick by him? Following the circulation method of the technique, Bufang once again activated the true energy in his body. At the same time, he tried to activate the 10,000 bestial flames. Feeling an itch in his throat, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of pale golden flame. His mouth. Why wasn't it burnt? This was the 8th grade earth dragon meat, and the spirit energy contained within it was no small matter. He subdued the 10,000 bestial flames just like that? This was too easy, wasn't it? Bufang poured the sweet and sour ribs on top of the earth dragon ribs. Within a short period of time, Bufang's hands seemed to have left streaks of light and shadows as he mixed the sweet and sour ribs. The mixture of the sweet and sour ribs and the ribs was just right. He wanted to see if the obsidian flames of heaven and earth could activate the black turtle constellation wok. With a ladle, a spoonful of sweet and sour tangerine sauce was ready. The moment the ingredients were poured into the wok, Bufang's pupils shrank. A burst of flame emerged from the wok. This was much easier than cooking with an ordinary iron wok. If he were to use his true energy to cook with an ordinary wok, he would need to calm his mind and have intimate contact with the wok. However, no matter how he tried, the 10,000 bestial flames showed no signs of moving. Bufang placed his palm on top of the black turtle constellation wok, and immediately felt a gust of faint heat gushing out. His heart was instantly filled with joy. He really activated it. What did it mean by no difficulty? Although the 10,000 bestial flames had just been born and was still a fire seed, no matter how weak it was still an obsidian flame of heaven and earth with boundless power. This time it was too much. He couldn't even activate the fire, let alone activate the black turtle constellation wok. That was the obsidian flame of heaven and earth, the 10,000 bestial flames. Pouring out the oil from the black turtle constellation wok, Bufang began to cook the sweet and sour sauce. Stinking brat, at least you have a conscience. The meat of the 8th grade earth dragon was much tougher than pork. However, after being fried, Bufang was extremely adept at controlling the heat. The earth dragon's meat became fatty and tender. Although it was his first time using the black turtle constellation wok, thanks to the god of cooking set, he could clearly feel every change in the energy in the wok. Bufang stroked Blacky's head and said calmly. The excited Bufang's eyes lit up. Blacky, who had been too lazy to speak, couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Its voice was still full of magnetism. Pouring the sweet and sour ribs into a blue and white porcelain plate, the aroma was several times stronger than the previous one. Bufang couldn't help but want to try it. He had been eyeing that wok for a long time. After all, this was a wok, not a brick. Rumble, rumble. The meat rolled rapidly in the wok, and the earth dragon's meat, which was wrapped in starch, gradually turned golden. Even the slightest difference would affect the taste of the dish. Above the black turtle constellation wok, there seemed to be a gigantic spirit turtle the size of a mountain, suppressing the gushing spirit energy. The spirit energy actually fled back into the wok. Blacky was completely captivated. In front of this delicacy, there was nothing else in its eyes. The energy whirlpool revolved around the golden flame. From time to time, it would extract a bit of energy from the golden flame and fuse it into the true energy whirlpool. With a thought, the black turtle constellation wok expanded, becoming the size of a normal wok. Blacky, time to eat. This aroma was really mesmerizing. After dealing with the wok, Bufang thought for a while and took out a piece of earth dragon's meat from the system's dimensional storage. This was the rib meat of an earth dragon. Chapter 356. Xiao Xiaolong was in a bad state for the past few days. Even though he would follow Bufang's instructions to cook and do business at Fang Fang's little store every day, he was mentally exhausted. As Xiao Meng's condition continued to deteriorate, the poison was getting deeper and deeper. His aura was getting weaker and weaker, and he was not far from death. Even though the emperor had arranged for the imperial physicians to treat Xiao Meng every day, the imperial physicians were already helpless and could only sigh endlessly. Since his father was about to die, how could he, as a son, be happy? That was why he had been in a trance for the past few days. However, there was always hope in his heart. Before Bufang left, he had told him that when Bufang returned, he might be able to cure his father. Xiao Xiaolong had always remembered this sentence, so he had been looking forward to Bufang's early return. Although Bufang had only left for less than half a month, in this half a month, he had been living a torturous life. "Owner Bu, you're finally back." Xiao Xiaolong was so excited that his eyes suddenly became a little red. Bufang was curled up in his chair. When he saw Xiao Xiaolong, he wanted to greet him. However, he did not expect Xiao Xiaolong to have such a big reaction, which scared him. After Xiao Xiaolong finished speaking, Bufang finally understood what was going on. General Xiaomeng was still poisoned by the Shura sect. Bufang remembered and immediately sighed. Looking at Xiao Xiaolong's hopeful expression, Bufang simply said, "It's all right. After today's opening hours, I will accompany you to see if I can detoxify the poison." Xiao Meng and Bufang could be considered old friends, so Bufang could not just watch him die from the poison. After Xiao Xiaolong received Bufang's confirmation, he was immediately overjoyed. His whole body became more energetic, and he excitedly entered the kitchen to practice. Bufang continued to lie on the chair leisurely, looking at the white clouds drifting across the sky from time to time. He squinted his eyes and enjoyed the rare tranquility. It had been a long time since the last time the army attacked the city. The customers in the store were gradually returning. Many customers who came to the store to eat would greet Bufang with a smile when they saw Bufang curled up on the chair. Bufang would occasionally nod in response. "Owner Bu, long time no see. What kind of delicacies have you been researching recently?" Fatty Jean walked over from the alley with his army of fatties and greeted Bufang with a smile. He was already a regular customer. Although Bufang's restaurant was becoming more and more famous, Bufang's reputation was also gradually spreading throughout the entire imperial city. However, Fatty Jean didn't care much because he was just a customer who came to eat at the restaurant. Ouyang Xiaoyi eagerly walked in. The moment she entered the store, she saw Bufang and screamed. Bufang lazily glanced at the little girl. He discovered that the little girl was actually getting taller and more slender and elegant. After exchanging a few words with the little girl, Bufang stood up from the chair. After stretching his body, he walked into the kitchen. Through the kitchen window, Ouyang Xiaoyi told him many of the customers' orders. Bufang looked through them and cooked together with Xiao Xiaolong. He didn't choose to use the Black Turtle Constellation Wok, nor did he use the Heaven and Earth Obsidian Flame. He just cooked normally. However, even so, the dishes cooked by Bufang were still overflowing with fragrance. The fragrance lingered in the entire kitchen and even drifted into the store. Owner Bu personally cooked, and the customers were extremely excited. It was an extremely rare opportunity to be able to taste the dishes cooked by Owner Bu. After the store became famous, more and more people came because of its reputation. There were even people who traveled thousands of miles from other counties just to have a taste of the restaurant's dishes. The dishes didn't disappoint them. Although Xiao Xiaolong was the one cooking most of the time, his cooking skills improved rapidly under Bufang's strict training. Of course, the majority of people still wanted to taste the dishes cooked by Owner Bu. According to rumors, the cooking skills of Owner Bu of Fong Fong's little store were the best in the entire empire. To be able to taste the dishes cooked by Owner Bu once, one could brag about it for 3 years. The atmosphere of the store was quite good. After the opening hours ended, there were still many people queuing up outside the store. When they found out that the store's opening hours ended, they felt regretful. However, they didn't choose to cause trouble and left one after another. Bufang wiped off the water stains on his hands and walked out of the kitchen with a few oyster pancakes. Xiao Xiaolong could not wait to follow behind him. After passing an oyster pancake to Ouyang Xiaoyi, Bufang pulled over a chair and sat down. He took a bite of the oyster pancake, and the plump oyster immediately entered his mouth. Thick steam began to spread and the aroma filled the air. Ouyang Xiaoyi had already eagerly sat down and started eating. Although Xiao Xiaolong was anxious, he felt helpless when he saw Bufang's unhurried manner. He also started eating the oyster pancake. The oyster pancake was made by Bufang. It was rich in spirit energy, and not only was it delicious, but it also made Xiao Xiaolong and Ouyang Xiaoyi feel exhausted after eating it. After they finished eating the oyster pancake, Bufang glanced at the impatient Xiao Xiaolong and slowly stood up. He changed his clothes, closed the store's doors, and followed Xiao Xiaolong and Ouyang Xiaoyi toward the general's manor. When Ouyang Xiaoyi found out that Bufang was going to treat Xiao Meng, she immediately eagerly wanted to follow him. The Ouyang family and the Xiao family had a good relationship. When Ouyang Xiaoyi found out that Xiao Meng was going to die, she was sad for a while. Now that she knew that owner Bu had a way to treat Xiao Meng, she was naturally excited. Looking at Bufang, her eyes flickered continuously. The smelly boss was getting more and more powerful. The three of them entered the Xiao mansion. It was Bufang's first time entering the general's manor, so he was naturally curious. The complex buildings were like a maze, causing Bufang to feel dizzy and disoriented. However, with Xiao Xiaolong leading the way, they soon arrived at Xiao Meng's room. In front of Xiao Meng's room, there was a group of people. Xiao Yinyu, whom Bufang had not seen for a long time, was also standing there. However, her complexion was not good, and her beautiful face was haggard. When Bufang saw Xiao Yinyu also saw Bufang. She was slightly startled, then her red lips slightly parted as if she had thought of something. A trace of excitement appeared on her face. Light Wind Empire, Main Hall. Ji Qingxue spent the past half a month in comfort and contentment. Ji Qingyu's army retreated, and the Empire's army followed up with a victorious pursuit. The Empire's army gradually gained the upper hand. The experts of the other forces in the Imperial City also left, and the Imperial City finally returned to its original state. Ji Qingxue reclined on the dragon throne, and a gentle and beautiful woman was massaging his temples with her jade-like fingers to relieve his fatigue. As the emperor of an empire, there were 3,000 beauties in his harem. Even though he had been busy with the empire's court affairs, he still had a few concubines. When he was tired, he would also let these concubines relieve his fatigue. Reporting, Your Majesty, Your Majesty! Just as Ji Qingxue was quietly enjoying this rare moment of relaxation, a loud roar came from outside the main hall. He couldn't help but open his eyes. All he saw was a general guarding the city gate. His face was deathly pale, and his body was trembling uncontrollably as he tumbled and crawled into the main hall. What's wrong? Why are you so flustered? Ji Qingxue furrowed his brows and said unhappily, Your Majesty. The general's face was pale, and he said in fear. However, his voice was stuttering incessantly. Imperial. Outside the Imperial City, there's a huge spirit beast that's rapidly approaching. Ji Qingxue was stunned, and then his eyes widened. What spirit beast? Can you tell what grade it is? It had only been a short while, and yet another frightening spirit beast had appeared. To be able to make the general so flustered, this spirit beast was definitely not ordinary. Could it be another 7th grade spirit beast? Or an 8th grade spirit beast? The general swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and looked at Ji Qingxue on the verge of tears. That spirit beast is too tall. It's as tall as a mountain, covering the sky. Its strength is truly inestimable. I think it might be a supreme beast. A supreme beast? Ji Qingxue was stunned, and then his face turned pale. He slumped onto the chair as if all the energy in his body had been sucked out. Why was it so difficult to be an emperor? Even a supreme beast had come looking for trouble? The majestic imperial city. Several hundred miles away, a gigantic figure that blotted out the sky emerged. A loud bang resounded, and the ground trembled. Then, this gigantic figure soared into the sky and landed with a loud rumble. Its single thick and sturdy leg stomped on the ground, causing the ground to crack. Even the official road outside the imperial city crumbled under this stomp. A sky-shaking croak resounded. The one-legged toad's gigantic eyes turned, and its target was the light-wind imperial city. Croak. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.